Come in before I change my mind. The words that changed everything. What happens when the CEO who destroyed your career shows up at your door, begging for help in the middle of a deadly storm? Ethan Walker had every reason to slam that door shut, but sometimes mercy costs more than pride. This is the story of one brutal night that shattered two lives and rebuilt them into something neither expected. Stay until the end and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The storm hit Brookhaven, Texas like God's own fist coming down on a defiant world. Ethan Walker stood at his kitchen window, watching the sky turn that particular shade of green-black that meant serious business. The kind of storm that made old-timers check their storm cellars and young fools grab their cameras. Lightning cracked across the horizon in jagged white veins, illuminating the scrub oak and mesquite trees that bent nearly horizontal under the wind's assault. "Daddy, I'm scared," Sophie's small voice carried from the hallway, barely audible over the thunder that followed 3 seconds later. 3 seconds meant the lightning was less than a mile away. Getting closer. Ethan turned from the window and crouched down as his 7-year-old daughter padded into the kitchen, dragging her stuffed elephant by one worn ear. Her dark hair, so much like her mother's it sometimes hurt to look at her, was mussed from tossing in bed, and her brown eyes were wide with fear. "Come here, baby girl." He opened his arms and she rushed into them, small and warm and trusting in a way that never failed to humble him. "It's just a storm. You know what Mama used to say about storms?" Sophie buried her face in his shoulder but mumbled the familiar words. "They're just the sky having big feelings." "That's right, and we're safe in here. This house has weathered 100 storms just like this one." He stood, lifting her easily, though she was getting bigger every day, growing up too fast, leaving him behind inch by inch. "Let's get you back to bed." "Can I sleep in your room?" "You bet." He carried her down the narrow hallway of their small ranch house, past the photos on the wall that documented a life interrupted. Wedding pictures from 8 years ago, Sophie's baby photos, and then, after a noticeable gap, just the two of them, learning to smile again. The last photo of all 3 of them together hung at the end of the hall. Emma had been sick then, her scarf hiding what the chemotherapy had taken, but her smile was genuine. She'd always been good at genuine. 3 years gone, and some days it felt like 3 lifetimes. Ethan tucked Sophie into his bed, pulling the quilt up to her chin. "You want the nightlight?" "I'm not a baby." "I know, but storms are dark, and even grown-ups don't like the dark sometimes." She considered this with the seriousness children bring to such matters. "Okay, just the small one." He plugged in the turtle nightlight that projected stars across the ceiling, a gift from Emma when Sophie was 3 and afraid of everything. The stars helped. They always did. "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby." "Are you still sad about work?" Ethan paused, his hand on the doorframe. Of course she'd noticed. Kids always noticed, no matter how well you thought you were hiding things. "A little bit. Ms. Donovan was mean to you." "Ms. Donovan is under a lot of pressure. Running a company isn't easy. Grandpa says she's a cold fish who wouldn't know good work if it bit her on the—" "Sophie Walker, your grandfather needs to watch his language." But Ethan couldn't quite suppress the smile. His father-in-law had indeed said exactly that, among other more colorful observations, after Ethan had made the mistake of venting over Sunday dinner. The board meeting had been 6 hours ago, but it still burned like fresh acid in his gut. 3 months of work, 3 months of late nights and careful calculations, of modeling and remodeling the cost-benefit analysis, reduced to rubble in 15 minutes. He could still hear Claire Donovan's voice, crisp and cold as a January frost. "This proposal shows a fundamental misunderstanding of our market position. Did you even consider the Q3 projections? Or were you too busy feeling sorry for yourself to do basic research?" The other board members had shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mark Chen, who'd been hired the same week as Ethan, had studied his notepad with sudden intensity. Sarah Martinez had at least had the decency to look sympathetic. But Claire had been relentless, picking apart every assumption, questioning every figure, her green eyes sharp as broken glass behind her designer frames. She'd been CEO for 8 months, brought in from some high-powered consulting firm in Boston to restructure and revitalize Meridian Tech Solutions, and in that time she'd made it abundantly clear that she had no patience for what she called mediocrity disguised as effort. "Mr. Walker, I expect better from my engineers, especially former senior engineers." The emphasis on former had been deliberate, a reminder of his demotion 3 months into her tenure. "Budget cuts," she'd said. "Restructuring. Nothing personal. Everything was personal when it was your career, your livelihood, your ability to keep a roof over your daughter's head." "Go to sleep, Sophie," Ethan said softly, pushing the memories away. "Tomorrow's a new day." "That's what you always say." "That's because it's always true." He kissed her forehead and stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed. The storm was intensifying now, rain hammering the roof like 10,000 angry fists. He should check the weather radio, make sure this wasn't tornadic. Should check that the flashlights had fresh batteries and the emergency kit was where he could grab it fast. Instead, he walked back to the kitchen and poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff he saved for bad days. And brother, this had been a bad day. The house groaned around him, old bones settling under the storm's weight. It wasn't much, this place. 1,200 square feet of aging ranch house on the edge of town, with a carport that needed new shingles and a fence that needed repainting. But it was paid for. Emma's life insurance had seen to that, at least. One less thing to worry about, though God knew there were plenty of other things to fill the worry space. Medical bills, even 3 years later. Sophie's growing need for new clothes, new shoes, school supplies, and extracurriculars. The car that was pushing 180,000 miles and developing an ominous knock in the engine. The demotion had cut his salary by 30%, and even though he was careful, even though he budgeted and meal planned and bought generic everything, the margins kept getting thinner. And now this. The humiliation in front of the board, the clear message that his days at Meridian were numbered. Claire Donovan was building her own team, bringing in her own people. Ethan had seen it before at other companies, the slow squeeze out of the old guard, making things uncomfortable enough that people quit before they had to be fired. He raised his glass to the empty kitchen. "Here's to new beginnings, Em, whether I want them or not." The bourbon burned going down, warm and familiar. Lightning struck close, too close, and the lights flickered. Ethan held his breath, counting. If the power went out, he'd need to get the generator running before Sophie woke up scared. But the lights held and he exhaled. The wind was screaming now, a high-pitched wail that sounded almost human, almost like... 3 sharp knocks on the front door cut through the storm's roar. Ethan froze, glass halfway to his lips. Nobody came calling in weather like this. Nobody with good sense, anyway. Probably a branch blown against the door, or debris from someone's garbage can. 3 more knocks, harder this time. Deliberate. He set down the glass and moved to the window, peering through the curtain into the darkness. The porch light was motion-activated, and it showed him a figure hunched against the rain. No, 2 figures. One tall, one small. The tall one knocked again, urgency in every movement. Ethan's hand went to the doorknob, then hesitated. This was rural Texas, and rural Texas had rules. You didn't open your door to strangers at night, storm or no storm. But as he watched, the tall figure shifted and he caught a glimpse of her face in the porch light. His breath caught. Claire Donovan. His boss, the woman who'd shredded his dignity 6 hours ago, was standing on his porch in the middle of a Category 3 equivalent storm, soaked to the bone, with what looked like a child clutched against her side. For a long moment, Ethan stood frozen, his hand on the doorknob, every bitter word from that board meeting echoing in his head. Fundamental misunderstanding. Didn't do basic research. Mediocrity disguised as effort. She knocked again, and this time he heard her voice, thin and desperate beneath the wind. "Please, anyone, my son!" The child. She had a child with her. Ethan's hand moved before his brain could catch up, throwing the deadbolt and yanking the door open. Wind and rain crashed into the entryway like a physical force, and Claire Donovan nearly fell across the threshold. "Come in before I change my mind," Ethan heard himself say, and even in that moment of crisis, the absurdity of it hit him. The exact words, the exact tone of grudging mercy. Claire stumbled inside, half carrying, half dragging a boy of maybe 8 or 9. Both were drenched, shaking violently. The boy's lips had a bluish tinge that Ethan didn't like at all. "Thank God," Claire gasped. "Thank God I couldn't." "Later." Ethan slammed the door shut against the storm and engaged the deadbolt. Bathroom. Now. Get those wet clothes off both of you before hypothermia sets in. Training kicked in. The old military training from his enlisted years, before college, before engineering, before any of this. Assess the situation, prioritize the threats, address them in order. He led them down the hallway, acutely aware that he was bringing his boss, the woman who'd humiliated him, into his home, into his private space. But the boy was shivering hard enough to hear his teeth chatter, and that was all that mattered right now. "Sophie's in my room," he said curtly. "You can change in here." He grabbed towels from the linen closet and thrust them at Claire. "Get dry. I'll find you both something to wear." We don't... Claire's usual composure was shattered, her voice breaking. She looked young suddenly, stripped of her CEO armor, just a terrified mother with a child in danger. "You don't have a choice. 5 minutes." Ethan met her eyes. Those green eyes that had been so cold in the boardroom were wide and frightened now, almost human. "I'll leave clothes outside the door. Put them on." He didn't wait for an answer, just pulled the bathroom door shut and headed for his bedroom. His hands were steadier than his thoughts. This couldn't be happening. This absolutely could not be happening. But it was. Sophie was sitting up in bed, awakened by the commotion. "Daddy, I heard voices." "We have guests, baby. They got caught in the storm." He pulled open his dresser, grabbing sweatpants and t-shirts. "I need you to be very grown up right now, okay? Can you do that?" "Okay." Sophie's eyes were enormous. "Is someone hurt?" "Just cold and wet. They'll be fine." He hoped that was true. The boy's color had been bad. Really bad. He grabbed one of Emma's old sweaters from the back of the closet. The soft blue one she'd worn when she was recovering, when the chemo had made her cold all the time. His fingers trembled slightly as he pulled it out. 3 years, and her scent was long gone, but the shape of it still held her memory. Claire Donovan would wear his dead wife's sweater. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. He knocked on the bathroom door. "Clothes," he said shortly, and left them in a pile on the floor. Back in the kitchen, he set water to boil for tea. Hot liquids, get their core temperatures up. The emergency kit was under the sink, and he pulled out the thermal blankets. His mind was running through possibilities. If the boy needed medical attention, could he get to the hospital in this? The roads would be flooded. Cell service was probably down. These storms always knocked out the towers. The bathroom door opened, and Claire emerged, swimming in his clothes. The t-shirt hung to her knees, the sweatpants were rolled up at the ankles. She'd tied back her wet hair with what looked like a rubber band from his bathroom drawer. Without makeup, without her tailored suits and her executive bearing, she looked almost ordinary. Except for her eyes, which were still sharp even in their fear. "Noah," she said. "My son, he's... Bring him to the living room. I've got the heat turned up." She disappeared and returned a moment later with the boy, Noah, wrapped in a towel. Ethan had laid the thermal blankets on the couch, and Claire settled there with her son pulled close against her, both of them cocooned in reflective silver. "Tea's coming. You need to warm up from the inside." Ethan stood in the doorway, uncertain. The domestic intimacy of the scene jarred against the harsh fluorescence of the boardroom, against the memory of her voice cutting him down. "What happened? Why were you out in this?" Claire was rubbing Noah's hands between hers, trying to restore circulation. "We were driving back from Dallas, from his father's." Her voice was tight, controlled despite the trembling. "The storm came up so fast. 1 minute there was rain, and then everything. We couldn't see. I pulled over, tried to wait it out, but the water was rising. The car started floating." "Floating?" Ethan's stomach dropped. "Flash flood?" "I think so. I got Noah out, but the current... We had to swim. I just grabbed him and started walking, looking for lights, for anything." She looked up at Ethan, and for the first time since he'd met her 8 months ago, he saw past the ice to something raw underneath. "Your house was the first light I saw." The kettle whistled. Ethan escaped to the kitchen, grateful for the excuse to look away from that unexpected vulnerability. He poured 2 mugs of tea, chamomile, the calming kind, and added honey. Comfort food. Emma had always said honey was medicine for the soul. When he returned, Claire had gotten Noah to stop shivering quite so violently. The boy's color was better, more pink than blue. That was good. That was something. Here, Ethan held out a mug. Careful, it's hot. Claire took it with both hands, wrapping her fingers around the ceramic. Thank you. The words were quiet, almost lost beneath the storm's continued assault on the roof. I know. After today, I know I'm probably the last person you wanted to see. Not the time. Ethan's voice was flat. He couldn't do this now. Couldn't unpack the complexity of having your tormentor suddenly human and needy in your living room. Drink your tea. He held out the second mug to Noah, who looked at him with dark eyes, his mother's eyes, that same sharp intelligence, but without the hardness. You like honey? The boy nodded slightly. Good. That's the secret ingredient. Makes anything better. He kept his voice gentle, the way he spoke to Sophie when she woke up from nightmares. What's your favorite subject in school? Science. Noah's voice was small, uncertain. Yeah? Me too, when I was your age. I used to build these crazy contraptions in my garage. Drove my mom nuts. He settled into the armchair across from the couch, maintaining distance. You build stuff? Sometimes. Robots mostly. Robots are cool. Sophie, my daughter, she's more into art. She's sleeping in the other room, but you'll probably meet her in the morning. Is she my age? A little color was returning to Noah's cheeks along with curiosity. She's 7. Probably close enough. Ethan glanced at Claire, who was watching this interaction with an expression he couldn't quite read. How old are you, Noah? 9. Good age. Old enough to handle a little adventure. He gestured toward the window where the storm still raged. You'll have a story to tell at school, huh? The Great Flood of Brookhaven. Noah managed a small smile. Claire was staring into her tea like it held answers. Her jaw was tight, her shoulders rigid despite the thermal blanket. Control, Ethan realized. She was fighting for control, for the armor she wore in every interaction. But it kept slipping, cracked by fear and cold and the shock of near disaster. The car? Ethan asked quietly. Gone. Swept away, I think. I couldn't. She stopped, swallowed. I just focused on getting Noah out. Smart. Cars are replaceable. He stood. I should check the weather radio, see if this is going to get worse. The radio was on the kitchen counter, and he turned it on to the emergency band. Static crackled, then a mechanical voice cut through. Flash flood warning remains in effect until 6 a.m. Residents are advised to shelter in place. Do not attempt to drive through flooded areas. Several road closures reported throughout Jefferson County. The voice continued its litany of warnings and closures, but Ethan had heard enough. Nobody was going anywhere tonight, which meant Claire Donovan, his boss, his critic, his career's executioner, was trapped in his house until morning. The universe's sense of humor was getting worse. He returned to the living room. Roads are closed. You're stuck here until this passes. We can't impose. You don't have a choice. He heard the edge in his voice and tried to soften it. This wasn't Noah's fault. Look, it's late, and you're both exhausted. We'll figure out the rest in the morning. For now, just rest. Claire opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Some battle played out behind those green eyes. Pride versus pragmatism. CEO versus mother. Mother won. Thank you, she said again, and this time there was something else in her voice. Humility, maybe. Or just bone-deep weariness. I'll get you some blankets. You and Noah can take the guest room. It's small, but there's a double bed. Ethan moved toward the linen closet, grateful again for the excuse to escape the intensity of the moment. Mr. Walker. He stopped, his back to her. Ethan. Claire's voice was quiet. Earlier today, at the meeting, I said not now. I need to say this. She stood, still wrapped in the thermal blanket like some kind of futuristic prophet. I was unnecessarily harsh. Your proposal had merit. I just had to prove you were tough. Had to show everyone you weren't going to coddle the old guard. Ethan turned to face her, and 3 months of swallowed resentment leaked into his voice. I get it. You're the new boss. You need to establish dominance. Fine. But did you have to do it in front of the entire board? Did you have to make it personal? Claire flinched as if he'd struck her. It wasn't. It was. He held up a hand. But like I said, not now. Your son almost died tonight. That trumps everything else. We can hate each other in the morning. I don't hate you. You've got a funny way of showing respect then. They stared at each other across the living room, the air thick with words unsaid and tensions unresolved. Noah was watching them both with worried eyes, and Ethan realized they were scaring the kid. He exhaled slowly, forcibly pushing down the anger. Sorry, that was out of line. You're guests in my home. You're safe here. Are we? Claire's voice was soft, almost vulnerable. Safe from you? The question hit harder than it should have. Ethan thought of Emma, of the promises he'd made at her bedside. Take care of Sophie. Be the man I know you are. Don't let the world make you bitter. Yeah, he said finally. You are. I wouldn't. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly exhausted. I'm not a monster, Claire. Whatever you think of my work, whatever happened today, I'm not that. I know. And strangely, she sounded like she meant it. The moment stretched, fragile and strange. Then Sophie's voice called out from the bedroom. Daddy, I'm still awake. Ethan grabbed onto the interruption like a lifeline. I should go. We'll be fine. He nodded and headed toward his daughter's voice, leaving Claire and Noah wrapped in their silver cocoon, strangers in his house, complications in human form. Sophie was indeed still awake, sitting up in bed with her elephant clutched tight. Who's here, Daddy? A lady from my work and her son. They got caught in the storm. He sat on the edge of the bed. They're going to stay tonight, just until the roads are safe. Is the lady the one who made you sad? Out of the mouths of babes. Yeah, baby, that's her. Why did you let her in then? It was a fair question. Ethan considered it, looking for an answer a 7-year-old could understand. Because she needed help, and we help people who need it, even if they haven't been nice to us. That's what Mama taught us, remember? Is that easy? No, baby. It's really hard. But we do it anyway? Yeah, we do it anyway. Sophie processed this with her characteristic seriousness. Okay, but if she's mean to you again, I'm going to tell her to stop. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. You're a fierce one, Sophie Walker. I learned from the best. She yawned, the adrenaline of the storm finally wearing off. Will you stay until I fall asleep? Always. He stretched out beside her on top of the covers, and she curled against him like she used to when she was tiny. His brave girl, his whole world. Whatever happened with the job, with Claire, with any of it, Sophie was what mattered. The storm hammered on outside, but inside, in this moment, there was peace. Sophie's breathing slowly evened out into sleep, and Ethan found himself staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Emma had put those up when Sophie was 3, standing on a chair in her bathrobe, determined to give their daughter her own sky. So she knows there's always light, Emma had said, even when she can't see it. He missed her with a physical ache that 3 years hadn't dulled, missed her wisdom, her steadiness, her way of seeing the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. She would have handled this situation with grace, would have known exactly what to say to Claire, how to navigate the awkwardness. But Emma was gone, and Ethan was doing the best he could. Carefully, he extracted himself from Sophie's sleeping grip and padded back to the living room. Claire and Noah were right where he'd left them, but Noah's eyes were closed now, his head on his mother's shoulder. Claire was stroking his hair absently, and she looked up when Ethan appeared. He's asleep, she whispered. Good. That's the best thing for him. Ethan kept his voice low. Let me show you the guest room. He led them down the hallway. It really was a small house. Everything was close quarters, to the room at the end. It had been Emma's home office once, then a storage room, and now it served as an occasional guest room for when Emma's parents visited. A double bed, a dresser, a window that looked out onto the backyard. Simple, but clean. Bathroom's right across the hall. There's a lock on this door if that makes you more comfortable. He stood in the doorway, maintaining professional distance. Fresh toothbrushes are in the cabinet under the sink. Ethan, Claire shifted Noah's weight in her arms. I really am sorry. About today. About all of this. Don't. He held up a hand. You don't get to apologize for this. For needing help. That's just being human. He paused. The rest of it, we'll deal with that later. Will there be a later, or will you report this to HR? Boss shows up at employee's house, creates uncomfortable situation. You think I'd do that? Ethan was genuinely surprised. I don't know. I don't know you at all, really. Claire's voice was tired, stripped of its usual sharpness. I know your resume. I know your work performance. I know you're consistently 10 minutes early and you never leave before finishing your assignments. But I don't know you. And whose fault is that? The words came out harder than he'd intended, and Claire flinched, but she didn't look away. Mine. I kept everyone at a distance. That's how I thought leadership worked. Well, Ethan leaned against the doorframe. Maybe that's something to think about. When you're not busy keeping your kid from freezing to death. Oh, a ghost of a smile touched her lips. Practical to the end. Someone has to be. He pushed off from the frame. Try to get some sleep. Morning will be here before you know it. He pulled the door closed and stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the storm. It was weakening now, the fury giving way to steady rain. The worst had passed. Or maybe it was just beginning. Back in the kitchen, Ethan poured himself another finger of bourbon, just one more, to settle his nerves. The clock on the microwave read 11:47 p.m. Less than 12 hours ago, he'd been sitting in a conference room, watching his career aspirations crumble. Now his boss was sleeping in his guest room, wearing his dead wife's sweater, vulnerable in a way that complicated everything. He should hate her. Part of him did hate her, the part that had watched 3 months of work dismissed with casual cruelty, that felt the sting of demotion and diminishment, that worried about Sophie's future because his salary wasn't enough anymore. But another part, the part Emma had cultivated, the part that still believed in basic human decency, that part had seen a mother terrified for her child and hadn't hesitated. You'd be proud of me, Em, he whispered to the empty kitchen. Or you'd say I'm an idiot. Possibly both. The bourbon burned less this time, familiar and warming. His phone buzzed. Surprisingly, the cell towers hadn't gone down after all. A text from Mark Chen. Roads flooded. Working from home tomorrow. You okay? Ethan thumbed back. Fine. House is solid. Stay safe. Another text, this one from his father-in-law. Storm bad out your way. Been worse. We're good. He didn't mention the guests. That would require explanations he wasn't ready to give. The house settled into nighttime quiet, punctuated by rain and the occasional groan of old wood. Ethan checked the locks, checked that the flashlights were still where he'd left them, checked on Sophie one more time, still sleeping peacefully, her elephant tucked under her chin. He paused outside the guest room door, listening. Soft breathing, nothing more. Good. They needed rest. Back in his own room, the room he'd shared with Emma, though he'd gotten rid of most of her things because it hurt too much to see them every day, Ethan lay down fully clothed on top of the covers. Sleep felt impossible. His mind was racing, replaying the evening in fragments. Claire's face in the porch light, desperate and afraid. Noah's blue lips. The moment of decision at the door, knowing he could have turned them away, knowing he probably should have. Come in before I change my mind. Words he couldn't take back now. The ceiling fan turned lazy circles overhead, and Ethan watched the shadows it cast. Emma used to say he thought too much, that he could analyze the joy right out of a moment. But this wasn't joy. This was something else, something complicated. Outside, the storm gentled into ordinary rain. Inside, two families, broken in different ways, shared the same temporary shelter. And Ethan Walker, single father and demoted engineer, stared at the ceiling and wondered what the morning would bring. Nothing good, probably. Morning had a way of making problems clearer, complications more complex. But for now, there was just the rain and the warmth of his house, and the knowledge that he'd done the right thing even when every bitter part of him had wanted to do something else. Emma would have been proud, or she'd have called him an idiot, possibly both. Ethan closed his eyes and let the sound of rain lull him towards sleep, knowing that tomorrow everything would change again. It always did. The only constant was change itself, that and Sophie's steady breathing from the room down the hall, the anchor that kept him grounded when everything else felt like it was washing away. The storm had brought Claire Donovan to his door. What the morning would bring, he couldn't begin to guess, but he'd face it the way he'd faced everything else since Emma died. One moment at a time, doing his best, trying to be the man his daughter needed him to be, even when that man had to open the door to his enemies, especially then. Morning arrived with the peculiar brightness that follows violent storms, the kind of light that seems scrubbed clean, as if the world has been washed new. Ethan woke to silence, the absence of rain so complete it felt like pressure in his ears. For a moment he lay still, disoriented, trying to remember why his clothes were twisted around him, why he'd slept on top of the covers. Then memory crashed back. Claire, Noah, the storm. He sat up quickly, running a hand through his hair. The clock read 6:23 a.m. Sophie would be awake soon. She was an early riser, always had been, and he needed to have coffee ready, needed to prepare her for the fact that they had house guests, needed to figure out what the hell happened next. The house was quiet as he padded to the kitchen in his socked feet. Through the window he could see the aftermath, branches scattered across the yard, a section of fence listing sideways, and in the distance, where the creek ran through the property line, the glint of water spread much wider than it should be. The flooding Claire had described was real enough. He wondered if her car had washed up somewhere downstream, or if it was still out there, submerged and lost. He started the coffee maker and stood watching it drip, the familiar morning ritual providing a thin veneer of normalcy. Behind him, a floorboard creaked. "I hope you don't mind." Claire's voice was quiet, uncertain in a way he'd never heard from her before. "I couldn't sleep." Ethan turned. She stood in the kitchen doorway wearing the same borrowed clothes from last night, her hair still damp and pushed back from her face. Without her executive armor, the sharp suits, the precise makeup, the aura of untouchability, she looked younger, more human, and tired in a way that went deeper than one sleepless night. "Coffee'll be ready in a minute." He pulled down a second mug. "How's Noah?" Still sleeping, he was exhausted. She moved into the kitchen slowly, like she wasn't sure she was welcome. "I can't thank you enough for—" "Don't." Ethan held up a hand. "We covered this last night. You needed help. I helped. End of story." "Is it, though?" Claire leaned against the counter, maintaining careful distance between them. "The end of the story?" "I don't know what you want me to say." The coffee maker gurgled, filling the kitchen with its rich scent. "You're my boss. You showed up at my door in a crisis. I didn't turn you away. That doesn't erase yesterday, but it doesn't mean we have to hash it all out over breakfast either." Yesterday. She said it like she was tasting the word, testing its weight. "You mean when I eviscerated your proposal in front of the board?" "Your words, not mine. But accurate." Claire accepted the mug he held out, wrapping both hands around it. "I was thinking about it, most of the night actually. About what you said, that I was establishing dominance. Wasn't wrong, was I?" Ethan leaned back against the opposite counter, coffee halfway to his lips. "No, you weren't." She met his eyes directly, no flinching. He had to give her that much. When Claire Donovan decided to face something, she didn't hide. "I came into Meridian knowing the board was skeptical of me. Young female CEO from out of state, no direct industry experience. They were waiting for me to fail. So you made sure everyone knew you were tough. Too tough, apparently." She took a sip of coffee, grimaced slightly. He made it strong, military strong, and took another sip anyway. "Your proposal wasn't bad, Ethan. It was actually quite good. But I picked it apart because I could, because I needed to show that I wouldn't accept anything less than exceptional." "Congratulations. You showed everyone you're ruthless." "That's not—" She stopped, exhaled slowly. "You're right. That is what I showed them." The admission hung in the air between them, unexpected and raw. Ethan studied her over the rim of his mug. This wasn't the woman who'd sat at the head of the conference table yesterday, all sharp edges and cutting remarks. This was someone else, someone caught between who she needed to be and who she actually was. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked finally. "Because I almost died last night." Claire's voice was steady but quiet. "Because my son almost died. And the only thing standing between us and hypothermia was the kindness of a man I'd spent the afternoon humiliating. She paused. That does things to your perspective. Near-death experiences tend to. Have you had many? Enough. Ethan thought of Emma's last days, of watching her slip away by increments, of the moment he'd understood she wasn't coming back. Enough to know that perspective is overrated. Tomorrow you'll be back in your corner office, and I'll be back at my desk, and none of this will matter. Will it really be that simple? It has to be. They stood in silence, drinking coffee while the morning brightened outside. Ethan could hear Sophie stirring in his bedroom, the rustle of covers and the soft thump of her elephant hitting the floor. Any minute now she'd appear, full of questions he didn't know how to answer. I should make breakfast. He moved toward the refrigerator, grateful for the excuse to turn away from Claire's too perceptive gaze. Sophie will be hungry, and I imagine Noah will be too when he wakes up. Let me help. You don't have to. I want to. Claire set down her mug with a decisive click. Please. I need to do something with my hands, or I'm going to start thinking too much. Ethan considered arguing, then decided it wasn't worth the effort. Fine, you can work on pancakes. Mixes in that cabinet, pans in the drawer below the stove. They moved around each other carefully, establishing rhythms. Ethan pulled eggs and bacon from the fridge while Claire found the pancake mix in measuring cups. It was strangely domestic, this dance in his small kitchen, and deeply surreal. Yesterday she'd been his boss. Today she was making pancakes in his dead wife's sweater. Daddy? Sophie appeared in the doorway, elephant tucked under one arm, her hair a wild tangle around her face. She stopped short when she saw Claire. Oh. Morning, baby girl. Ethan crouched down to her level. Remember I told you we had guests? The lady from your work. Sophie's eyes were wide, taking in every detail. You're wearing Daddy's clothes. My clothes got wet in the storm. Claire's voice was gentler than Ethan had ever heard it. Your dad was kind enough to lend me these. That's Mama's sweater. The words dropped into the kitchen like stones into still water. Ethan saw Claire's face go pale, saw her hand still on the mixing bowl. It is, Ethan said quietly. And it's okay. Mama would have wanted to help too. Sophie processed this with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. Okay, but you have to be nice to my dad today. He was sad yesterday. Sophie, Ethan started. No, she's right. Claire met Sophie's gaze directly, speaking to her like an adult. I wasn't nice to your dad yesterday. I'm sorry about that. You should tell him, not me. I did, but I'll tell him again. Claire turned to Ethan, and there was something vulnerable in her expression, something that made his chest tight. I'm sorry. For yesterday. For how I treated you and your work. Ethan wanted to stay angry. It would be easier to stay angry. But Sophie was watching, and Emma's voice echoed in his memory. We help people who need it, even if they haven't been nice to us. Apology accepted, he said finally. Now let's eat before everything gets cold. Sophie climbed onto her chair at the small kitchen table. Is your boy going to eat with us? His name's Noah, and yes, when he wakes up. Claire had returned to mixing pancake batter with slightly trembling hands. He's 9, a little older than you. Does he like Legos? He loves Legos. Good. I have a big castle we can build. Sophie swung her legs, already planning. Does he have a mom? The question was innocent, but Ethan saw Claire's shoulders stiffen. He has me, she said carefully. His dad lives in Dallas. That's where we were coming from last night. Oh. Sophie considered this. I don't have a mom anymore. She died when I was 4. I'm sorry. Claire's voice was thick. That must be very hard. Sometimes. But Daddy takes good care of me. Sophie looked at Ethan with absolute trust, and he felt his throat tighten. He's the best daddy in the whole world. I can see that, Claire said softly, and when Ethan glanced at her, he saw unshed tears bright in her eyes. They ate breakfast in the small dining nook off the kitchen, pancakes and bacon and eggs, ordinary food that tasted extraordinary after the night's drama. Noah emerged halfway through, shy and still pale, but warming up when Sophie immediately pulled him into conversation about Legos and her school and her favorite TV shows. Claire watched her son with an expression Ethan recognized, the fierce protectiveness of a parent who's seen how fragile life really is. "These are really good," Noah said around a mouthful of pancake. "Did you make them, Mr. Walker?" "Your mom did, actually." Noah looked at Claire with surprise. "You cooked?" "I'm capable of basic tasks, Noah." But Claire's tone was light, almost playful. "You never cook at home." "That's because we're always running between your activities and my work." She reached over and smoothed his hair back, a gesture so tender it made Ethan look away. "But I know how." "Can we stay here?" Noah asked suddenly. "I like it here. It's quiet." "We can't impose on Mr. Walker's hospitality any more than we already have." Claire's CEO voice was creeping back, that professional distance. "Once the roads are clear, we'll need to figure out our situation." "But I want to stay." Noah looked at Sophie. "We were going to build the castle." "Noah." "It's fine," Ethan heard himself say. "Let them play for a while. You and I can figure out the logistics." Claire opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Ethan could see the calculation behind her eyes, weighing imposition against Noah's happiness, professional boundaries against human need. Mother won out over CEO again. "All right, for a little while." Sophie and Noah disappeared into the living room, their voices rising in excited discussion about turrets and moats. Ethan and Claire cleared the breakfast dishes in silence, falling back into that strange domestic rhythm. "I should call about my car," Claire said finally, drying the last plate, "and contact my insurance, and figure out how to get back to town. Roads are probably still a mess. You saw the flooding." Ethan gestured toward the window. "Give it a few hours. Let the water recede. I have meetings this afternoon. Conference calls." "It's Saturday." Claire blinked. "Is it? You lost track?" "I always lose track." She set down the dish towel with more force than necessary. "That's part of the problem, isn't it? I'm so focused on work that I forget there's a world outside of quarterly reports and board meetings. Not my place to judge how you spend your time." "Isn't it, though?" She turned to face him, leaning back against the counter in a mirror of his own posture. "Last night you said I had a funny way of showing respect. You were right. I'm not good at this. At balancing. This? Life. Work. Being a person instead of a position." She crossed her arms, a defensive gesture that made her look younger. "I was promoted because I'm good at the job, Ethan. I can see inefficiencies others miss. I can cut through red tape and make hard decisions. But I'm terrible at the human part. The part where I remember that every employee is a person with a life and problems and dignity. So you're self-aware. That's something. Is it? Or is it just another excuse?" Claire's voice rose slightly, frustration bleeding through. "I knew yesterday that I was being too harsh. I knew it, and I did it anyway because proving myself felt more important than being decent." From the living room came the sound of children's laughter, Sophie and Noah finding common ground in plastic bricks and imagination. Ethan listened to it for a moment, letting it settle something in his chest. "You want absolution," he said finally. "You want me to say it's okay, that I understand the pressure you were under, that we can just move past it. Don't I get that? After last night? Last night you were a mother in danger. This morning you're my boss again." Ethan met her eyes steadily. "Those are two different people, Claire, and I don't know which one is real." "Both. Neither." She pushed off from the counter, pacing the small kitchen like a caged animal. "I don't know anymore. I used to be so sure of everything, but Noah's father left because I worked too much. My mother thinks I'm destroying my son's childhood, and now I'm standing in a stranger's kitchen wearing his dead wife's clothes, having an existential crisis over pancakes." Despite himself, despite everything, Ethan laughed. "When you put it that way, it does sound absurd." "It's not funny." "It's a little funny." Claire stared at him for a moment, then her lips twitched. "Maybe a little." The tension broke like morning fog burning off, leaving something easier in its wake. Not forgiveness, that would take longer, but a tentative understanding. They were both just people trying to navigate impossible situations, making mistakes, doing damage, trying to repair it. I really am sorry, Claire said quietly. For yesterday. For all the days before that when I didn't see you as anything but a line item on an organizational chart. I know. And he did know. He could hear the truth of it in her voice. But you're going to have to prove it, not just say it. How? I don't know yet. That's your problem to solve. Ethan moved toward the living room, where Sophie was explaining her architectural vision to Noah with the seriousness of a master builder. For now, let's just get through today. The morning unfolded with surprising ease. The children built their Lego castle with intense concentration, collaborating on design decisions with a seriousness that would have been funny if it weren't so earnest. Claire made more coffee and tried repeatedly to check her phone, but the service was spotty, cutting in and out with the storm's lingering effects. The world will survive without you for a few hours, Ethan said, catching her for the third time staring at her blank screen. That's what I'm afraid of. But she put the phone down. Around noon, Ethan ventured outside to assess the damage. The fence could be fixed easily enough. The branches needed clearing, and the flooding. He walked down to the creek and whistled low. The water was running high and fast, chocolate brown with sediment, spreading across the low-lying areas in vast temporary lakes. Nothing was getting through this for at least another day. Claire joined him at the creek's edge, picking her way carefully through the muddy grass. She'd borrowed a pair of his work boots, too big, flopping slightly with each step, and looked utterly incongruous in her borrowed clothes and oversized footwear. It's worse than I thought, she said, staring at the water. Flash floods are unpredictable. You're lucky you made it out of your car. I know. She was quiet for a moment, watching the current carry branches and debris past them. I keep thinking about it. That moment when the car started floating. Everything went slow and fast at the same time. I couldn't think, couldn't process. I just knew I had to get Noah out. Adrenaline. It shuts down higher reasoning, focuses everything on survival. Have you studied this or experienced it? Both. Ethan bent to pick up a fallen branch, tossing it toward his growing debris pile. I was enlisted for 4 years before college, did a tour in Afghanistan. You learn about adrenaline pretty quick in a combat zone. Claire looked at him with new interest. I didn't know that. It's not in my personnel file. Ancient history. Not that ancient. You're what, 35? 37. You? 34. Young for a CEO, they keep reminding me. Who's they? Everyone. The board, my mother, my ex-husband, who loves to point out that my ambition destroyed our marriage. She kicked at a clump of mud. Maybe he was right. Or maybe he couldn't handle having a wife more successful than him. Ethan kept his voice neutral. That's usually what you work too much actually means. You sound like you have experience. Not personally, but I watched my sister go through it. Her ex spent 5 years complaining that she was never home, that her job was more important than their family. Turned out what he really wanted was a housewife, not a partner. And your wife, Emma? Claire asked it carefully, like she was stepping on uncertain ground. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, considering how much to share. Emma was a teacher, 3rd grade. She loved her job, but it was never about career advancement for her. It was about the kids. He smiled at the memory. She used to say that if she could help one child fall in love with reading, her whole year was worthwhile. She sounds lovely. She was. The past tense still hurt. She got sick 3 months after Sophie's 4th birthday. Ovarian cancer, stage 4. We fought it hard. Surgery, chemo, radiation, clinical trials, but it was too aggressive. She died 18 months later. I'm so sorry. Claire's voice was thick with genuine sympathy. That must have been, I can't imagine. You learn to carry it. The grief doesn't get smaller, but you get stronger at holding it. He glanced at her. That's not in my personnel file either. Maybe it should be. Maybe we should all know more about each other than what's in the files. They walked back toward the house in companionable silence. Ethan found himself stealing glances at Claire, trying to reconcile this thoughtful, vulnerable woman with the Ice Queen CEO who'd torn apart his proposal. Maybe they were both real. Maybe people were always more complicated than the roles they played. Sophie met them at the door, bouncing with excitement. Daddy, Noah and I built the biggest castle ever. You have to come see. Lead the way, architect. The castle was indeed impressive, sprawling across most of the living room floor, complete with towers and a working drawbridge, and what appeared to be a dragon made from red and orange bricks. Noah stood beside it proudly, and Ethan saw Claire's expression soften as she took in her son's happiness. This is spectacular, Claire said. You two make a good team. Noah's really smart, Sophie announced. He knows all about structural integrity. Structural integrity? Ethan raised an eyebrow. It means making sure things don't fall down, Noah explained seriously. You have to distribute the weight evenly, or the whole thing collapses. Sound engineering principle, Ethan agreed, shooting Claire an amused look. He gets it from his father, Claire said. Michael's an architect. He's always talking about load-bearing walls and stress points. Do you see him a lot? Sophie asked Noah. Your dad? Every other weekend, and Wednesdays for dinner. Noah's voice was matter-of-fact, but Ethan heard the note underneath, the resignation of a child who'd learned not to expect more. He's busy with his new family. New family? Sophie looked confused. He has a girlfriend, Tanya. She has 2 kids. Noah shrugged. They're okay, I guess. Claire's jaw was tight, but she kept her voice light. How about some lunch? I'm starving. They made sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly for the kids, turkey and cheese for the adults, and ate at the kitchen table while Sophie regaled them with stories from school. She was a natural performer, animated and enthusiastic, and Ethan watched Noah slowly come out of his shell under her relentless friendliness. After lunch, Claire finally got a stable phone signal and stepped onto the porch to make her calls. Through the window, Ethan watched her pace, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesturing as she talked. Even in borrowed clothes and oversized boots, she carried authority. It was in her posture, her movements, the way she commanded space. Is Ms. Donovan nice? Sophie asked, appearing at his elbow. When she wants to be. She seems sad. Out of the mouths of babes, again. Maybe she is, baby. Adults are complicated. Are you still mad at her? Ethan considered the question. Was he? The anger from yesterday had dulled into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of weary acceptance. I don't know. Maybe a little. But it's not your job to worry about that. I know. But you're happier when you're not mad. Sophie leaned against him, small and warm. Mama used to say that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. Your mama was a wise woman. I know. I wish I remembered her better. The admission pierced him. Sophie had been so young when Emma died, 4 years old, barely forming long-term memories. What she remembered was often pieced together from photos and stories, a patchwork mother rather than a living presence. She loved you more than anything, Ethan said, pulling Sophie close. Every single day, she loved you. I know, you tell me all the time. Sophie looked up at him with those serious brown eyes. Do you think you'll ever get married again? The question caught him completely off guard. Where did that come from? Billy Rodriguez's dad got married again, to their neighbor. Billy says it's weird, but also kind of nice because now he has someone to make him breakfast. You have me to make you breakfast. I know, but don't you get lonely? Did he? Ethan had gotten so used to the loneliness that it had become background noise, as constant and unremarkable as his heartbeat. He'd convinced himself he was too busy for dating, too focused on Sophie, too stuck in his grief. But maybe those were just excuses. Sometimes, he admitted. But I've got you, and that's enough. Okay. Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer. She glanced toward the window where Claire was still on the phone. Ms. Donovan looks lonely too. Sophie Walker, are you matchmaking? I don't know what that means. Yes, you do, you clever thing. But he was smiling despite himself. Claire came back inside, her phone clutched in one hand, her expression tight. The insurance company can't process anything until Monday, and there's no way to get a rental car out here with the roads like they are. She looked at Ethan helplessly. I hate to ask, but you need to stay another night. I'll pay you, room and board. Whatever's fair. Stop! Ethan held up a hand. You're not paying me. You're guests who got caught in a disaster. That's it. But we're imposing a... You are, he agreed. But that's not your fault. The storm's not your fault. Just let it go, Claire. For once in your life, just accept help without turning it into a transaction. She stared at him for a long moment, and he watched her wrestle with it. The need for control, the discomfort of dependence, the CEO's instinct to maintain power through exchange. Finally, something in her face softened. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. You're welcome. The afternoon stretched into evening in a way that felt almost normal. The children played while Ethan worked on his laptop, catching up on emails, checking project statuses, doing the weekend work that his demotion hadn't eliminated. Claire sat at the other end of the couch, her own laptop balanced on her knees, frowning at spreadsheets with the focused intensity of a general planning a battle. Do you always work weekends? Ethan asked finally. Usually. Do you? Since the demotion, yeah. Have to prove I'm still valuable, even at a lower pay grade. Claire's fingers stilled on the keyboard. That's not... You shouldn't have to prove anything. And yet, here we are. She closed the laptop with a definitive snap. What would you say if I told you the demotion was a mistake? Ethan looked up slowly. I'd say that's a hell of a thing to admit. The board wanted cuts. I had to show fiscal responsibility in my first quarter. Your salary was one of the highest in engineering, and you'd been there long enough that cutting you sent a message without gutting current projects. So I was sacrificed for optics. Yes. She met his eyes directly. And I went along with it because I was new and scared and trying to prove I could make tough decisions. Well, congratulations, you proved it. Don't. Her voice was sharp. Don't make this easier for me by being sarcastic. Let me sit with how badly I screwed up. Ethan studied her for a long moment. The evening light coming through the window caught her profile, highlighting the tension in her jaw, the shadows under her eyes. She looked exhausted, worn down by more than one sleepless night. Why are you telling me this? He asked finally. Because you deserve to know. And because... She stopped, choosing her words carefully. Because yesterday, when I tore apart your proposal, I wasn't thinking about you as a person. I was thinking about you as a problem, an obstacle I had to overcome to maintain authority. That's not who I want to be. So who do you want to be? I don't know yet. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. I thought I knew. I thought being CEO meant being strong and decisive and unwavering, but maybe it just means being cruel. Or maybe, Ethan said slowly, it means being human enough to admit mistakes. Claire looked at him with something like hope in her eyes. You think it's that simple? Nothing's simple, but it's a start. The moment hung between them, fragile and significant. Then Noah called from the other room. Mom, can we watch a movie? What movie? Claire called back. Sophie says she has all the Marvel ones. Of course she does. Ethan stood, grateful for the interruption. Movie marathon it is. I'll make popcorn. They settled in for an evening of superheroes and explosions, the four of them crowded onto the couch with bowls of popcorn balanced on laps. Sophie and Noah provided running commentary, debating the relative merits of different Avengers with the passion of true fans. Claire laughed at their intensity, and Ethan found himself watching her instead of the screen, noting how her guard came down around her son, how young she looked when she smiled. When the children finally crashed around 9 p.m., sprawled in a pile of blankets on the living room floor, Sophie's elephant wedged between them, Claire and Ethan cleaned up in comfortable silence. They're good kids, Claire said, rinsing popcorn bowls. They are. You're raising Noah well. Am I? She set down the bowl with a clatter. Half the time I feel like I'm failing him, missing his games, forgetting conferences, being too tired to really listen when he wants to talk. But you're here. You're trying. That counts for more than you think. Ethan dried the bowl and put it away. Emma used to say that perfect parenting was a myth invented to make parents feel guilty. All you can do is love them and show up and hope it's enough. Was it? Enough? For Sophie? Yeah, she knows she's loved. That's the foundation everything else is built on. Claire leaned against the counter, that position that had become familiar over the course of the day. Can I ask you something? Depends on the question. How do you do it? Balance everything, work and parenting, and just living? Ethan almost laughed. You think I have it figured out? You seem to. Your house is clean. Sophie's happy and well-adjusted. You managed to hold it all together. Clean is relative. Sophie's happy because I make it a priority, even when I'm drowning, and holding it together? He shook his head. Most days I'm barely treading water, but you keep swimming because the alternative is sinking, and that's not an option when someone depends on you. And you don't resent it, the responsibility? Sometimes. On the hard days, yeah. But resentment doesn't change anything. He met her eyes. You asked what I'd say if you told me the demotion was a mistake. Here's what I'll say. I appreciate the honesty. But honesty doesn't pay Sophie's medical bills or fix our car or keep the lights on. So unless you're offering to fix it, the admission doesn't change much. Claire flinched. That's fair and harsh. Truth usually is. They stood in the quiet kitchen, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down between them. Finally, Claire spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I did want to fix it? Then you'd have to figure out how to do that without making it look like favoritism, without compromising either of our positions. Ethan crossed his arms. And you'd have to be sure you're doing it for the right reasons, not just because you feel guilty. What are the right reasons? Because I'm good at my job. Because I earned that position. Because the demotion was political bullshit that hurt the company as much as it hurt me. He held her gaze steadily. Not because you stayed in my house for a weekend. I can do that, Claire said. I can fix this. We'll see. He didn't believe her. Not entirely. But there was something in her expression, a determination that went beyond guilt or gratitude, that made him think maybe, just maybe, she meant it. They checked on the children one more time, both still deeply asleep, Noah's arm thrown over Sophie's elephant, and then stood awkwardly in the hallway, the day's easy rhythm suddenly uncertain. I should let you get some sleep, Claire said. Thank you again for everything, for your hospitality and your honesty. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out the car situation. She nodded and moved toward the guest room, then paused with her hand on the doorknob. Ethan? Yeah? For what it's worth, I am going to fix this. The demotion, the way I've treated you, all of it. Her voice was firm, resolved. Not because I owe you, but because it's the right thing to do. Okay, Ethan said simply, because what else was there to say? She disappeared into the guest room, and Ethan stood alone in the hallway of his small house, listening to the settling silence. Outside, the night was clear and cool. The storm's violence transformed into stillness. Inside, two families who'd been strangers yesterday were learning to navigate each other's spaces, finding unexpected common ground. Tomorrow Claire would be his boss again. Tomorrow, the complications would reassert themselves. The professional boundaries would snap back into place. But tonight, for these few hours, they were just people who'd survived something together. And maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. Ethan lay awake long after the house settled into silence, staring at the familiar shadows on his ceiling. The weekend had fractured something, not broken it exactly, but cracked it open enough that light could get in. Or maybe darkness could get out. He wasn't sure which metaphor fit better. Sunday morning arrived with Sophie's inevitable early wake-up call, her small voice cutting through his half-sleep. Daddy, can we make pancakes again? Noah really liked them. Noah's mom made those, remember? But you can make them too, please. He couldn't say no to her, never could. So they made pancakes together, Sophie standing on her step stool to help measure and mix, getting flour on her nose and giggling when he wiped it off. By the time Claire and Noah emerged, both looking more rested, more solid than yesterday, the kitchen smelled like maple syrup and morning. I could get used to this, Noah said, climbing into his chair with the ease of someone who'd already claimed his space. Don't, Claire said, but her tone was gentle. We're going home today. But Mom, Noah. Just his name, but with enough weight that he subsided into disappointed silence. Ethan checked his phone while they ate. The Weather Service had downgraded all warnings, and the local news showed road crews working to clear the flooding. By afternoon, most routes would be passable. Claire could leave, should leave, would leave. The relief he expected to feel didn't come. Instead, there was something else, a strange reluctance, an awareness that once she left, the spell would break. Tomorrow morning, he'd walk into Meridian as the demoted engineer, and she'd be the CEO who'd put him there, and this weekend would become an anomaly neither of them knew how to address. "I called a tow company," Claire said, scrolling through her phone. "They can get my car tomorrow, hopefully salvage something, and there's a rental place in town that opens at noon. I can drive you." The offer was out before Ethan thought it through. "You don't have to. Roads might still be tricky. You don't know the area." He kept his voice neutral, practical. "Besides, I need to pick up some supplies from the hardware store anyway." It was a transparent excuse, and they both knew it, but Claire nodded. "Thank you." They loaded into Ethan's aging Ford pickup around 11, Sophie and Noah in the back seat already planning their next Lego project, Claire in the passenger seat looking incongruous in her borrowed clothes. She'd washed them the night before, but they were still wrinkled, still clearly not hers. It should have looked ridiculous. Instead, it looked oddly right, like she belonged in this ordinary life with its ordinary complications. The drive into town revealed the storm's full fury. Trees down across yards, power lines sagging, debris scattered like confetti after some apocalyptic celebration. The creek that had nearly killed Claire and Noah was visible in stretches, swollen and brown, still dangerously high. She stared at it as they passed, her face pale. "That's where," she started. "Probably. You got lucky." "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. Downtown Brookhaven was a study in small-town resilience, shopkeepers sweeping water out of doorways, neighbors helping neighbors clear fallen branches. The diner packed with people swapping storm stories over coffee. Ethan parked in front of the rental car office and turned to face Claire. "You sure about this? Heading back today?" "I have to. Tomorrow's Monday. We both have work." "Right. Work." He said it like a foreign word, something he'd temporarily forgotten existed. The rental process took longer than expected, paperwork and insurance verification and damage waivers. Sophie and Noah wandered the small office, studying the laminated maps on the walls and arguing good-naturedly about which route was fastest to Dallas. Ethan stood by the window, watching Claire negotiate with the clerk, seeing her CEO persona reassemble itself piece by piece. The borrowed clothes couldn't hide it. The way she stood, the way she spoke, the assumption of authority that came as naturally as breathing. When she finally emerged with keys in hand, she looked exhausted. "They only had an SUV, twice what I need, but it's that or wait until tomorrow." "Take it, get home safe." They walked to where the massive vehicle sat in the lot, and Claire stared at it like it was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. "I hate these things, can barely see over the hood. Want me to follow you? Make sure you get on the highway okay?" "Ethan, you've done enough." "I know, I'm offering to do more." She met his eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. Acknowledgement of the strangeness of this, the impossibility of categorizing what had happened over the past 48 hours. "Okay," she said finally. "Thank you." They caravanned out of town, Ethan's truck trailing the rental SUV. At the highway entrance, Claire pulled over and got out, Noah following. Sophie tumbled out of Ethan's truck and immediately grabbed Noah in a fierce hug. "You have to come back and visit," Sophie demanded. "I will, and you can come see me in the city." Noah looked up at his mother. "Right, Mom?" "We'll figure something out," Claire said, but her voice was tight. She turned to Ethan, and for a moment neither of them seemed to know what to say. The weekend hung between them like a bridge neither was sure would hold weight. "So," Ethan said finally, "see you tomorrow?" "Yes, tomorrow." Claire hesitated, then held out her hand, a formal gesture that felt absurdly corporate after everything. But when Ethan shook it, her grip was warm and lingering. "Thank you. For everything. For your kindness when you had every reason to turn us away. You needed help. That's reason enough." "Is it really that simple for you?" "Has to be. Otherwise, the world gets too complicated to navigate." Claire smiled, a real smile, not the professional mask she wore at work. "Maybe I need to learn that simplicity." "Maybe you do." She squeezed his hand once more, then let go and climbed into the SUV. Noah waved frantically from the passenger seat as they pulled away, and Sophie waved back until the vehicle disappeared around a curve. "I like Noah," Sophie announced, climbing back into the truck. "And Miss Donovan isn't so scary when she's being regular." "Regular?" "You know, like a normal person instead of a work person." Out of the mouths of babes. Again. They drove home in comfortable silence, Sophie humming to herself while Ethan tried to sort through the tangle of feelings the weekend had left him with. Gratitude that Claire and Noah were safe. Confusion about what happened next. A strange, unexpected warmth at the memory of her sitting at his kitchen table, vulnerable and uncertain and achingly human. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Ethan dropped Sophie at school and drove to Meridian Tech Solutions with his stomach in knots. The building looked the same, modern glass and steel, the kind of architecture meant to signal innovation and progress. But walking through the doors felt different, charged with new complexity. Mark Chen caught him at the coffee station. "Dude, crazy storm, right? My basement flooded. How'd you make out?" "Fine. Lost some shingles, nothing major." "Lucky. Hey, did you hear? Donovan's back. Thought maybe she'd work remote today, but nope. In her office at 7 a.m. like always." Ethan's coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "Great. You okay, man? You look weird." "Just tired. Long weekend." He escaped to his desk, his smaller desk in the corner, rather than by the window where he used to sit. The demotion had come with a literal downgrade in real estate. Ethan booted up his computer and tried to focus on the project queue, but his attention kept drifting to the executive floor visible through the glass-walled conference rooms above. At 10 o'clock, his phone pinged with a calendar invitation. Project review meeting, conference room B, 2 p.m., required attendees E. Walker, S. Martinez, M. Chen, C. Donovan. His heart kicked into a faster rhythm. This would be the first time seeing Claire in a professional context since the weekend. The first test of whether anything had actually changed, or if Saturday's promises had evaporated in the light of Monday's reality. The morning crawled by. Ethan threw himself into work, trying to ignore the curious glances from colleagues who'd heard about Friday's board meeting humiliation. Office gossip moved fast, and by now everyone knew that Donovan had eviscerated his proposal. They were probably expecting round 2. At 1:55 p.m., Ethan gathered his laptop and notes and headed for conference room B. Sarah Martinez was already there, looking sympathetic. Mark arrived a minute later, nervous energy radiating off him. They made small talk about the storm damage while waiting, the minutes stretching like taffy. At exactly 2:00 p.m., Claire walked in. She was fully armored now, tailored navy suit, hair pulled back in a severe bun, minimal makeup that somehow made her look both younger and more intimidating. The CEO was back in full force, and Ethan felt the weekend recede into unreality. Had he really made her pancakes? Had she really worn Emma's sweater? "Thank you for coming on short notice," Claire said, settling at the head of the table and opening her laptop with crisp efficiency. "I wanted to discuss the Q4 initiative proposals before the board meeting next week." Professional, distant, no acknowledgement that anything had changed. Ethan felt something in his chest tighten with disappointment he had no right to feel. Sarah presented first, a proposal for streamlining the customer service protocols. Claire listened intently, asked sharp questions, but her feedback was constructive rather than destructive. When Mark went next with his infrastructure upgrade plan, she actually smiled at one of his jokes, a brief crack in the professional facade. Then it was Ethan's turn. He pulled up his slides, acutely aware of Claire's eyes on him. The proposal was solid. He'd spent the weekend refining it, unable to completely shut off his work brain even in the midst of crisis. It addressed her Friday criticisms directly, incorporating the Q3 projections she'd mentioned, adding market analysis he'd initially skipped. He presented clearly, methodically, waiting for the axe to fall. When he finished, silence filled the room. Sarah was watching Claire carefully. Mark was studying his notepad with intense focus. Claire leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "That's significantly improved from Friday's version. I took your feedback seriously." "I can see that." She paused, and Ethan braced himself. "The cost-benefit analysis here is particularly strong, and the implementation timeline is realistic, which wasn't the case before." Wait, was that praise? However, Claire continued, and there it was. The inevitable, however. I think you're still underestimating the resource allocation needed for Phase 2. If you look at the personnel requirements, she pulled up a spreadsheet on the main screen and walked through her analysis. But this time it wasn't an attack. It was a conversation, a back and forth, where she identified problems and Ethan offered solutions, where they built on each other's ideas rather than tearing them down. Sarah and Mark exchanged glances, clearly confused by this new dynamic. When the meeting finally wrapped at 3:30, Claire gathered her materials with brisk efficiency. Ethan, stay for a moment. The rest of you are dismissed. Oh God. Here it came. The real conversation, the acknowledgement of the weekend's awkwardness, the establishment of new boundaries. The door closed behind Sarah and Mark, and suddenly the conference room felt very small. Claire didn't sit back down. Instead, she moved to the window, staring out at the parking lot below. That was professional of you, keeping things business-focused. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Yes, but I half expected. I don't know what I expected. She turned to face him. The demotion. I meant what I said this weekend. I'm going to fix it. Claire, let me finish. I spoke with the board chair this morning, explained that the cost-cutting measures had been short-sighted, that we'd inadvertently gutted our senior engineering talent right when we need it most for the Q4 push. She crossed her arms, defensive despite the confident words. I'm recommending your reinstatement to senior engineer effective immediately, with back pay. Ethan felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. You're serious? Completely. But there are conditions. Of course there were. Which are? You report directly to me for the next quarter. Weekly check-ins, full transparency on project status. I need to be able to show the board that this isn't favoritism, that you're earning this. Earning back what I already earned? The words came out sharper than intended. I know how it sounds, but this is the only way I can sell it without creating a shitstorm of office politics. Claire's voice was tight. Take it or leave it, Ethan. This is the best I can offer. He studied her face, trying to read past the CEO mask. Was this guilt? Genuine recognition of his value? Or something more complicated, tangled up with the weekend's unexpected intimacy? I'll take it, he heard himself say. But I want the reporting structure to be temporary. 3 months, then I'm back to standard chain of command. Agreed. And I want it in writing, signed by you and HR. No backing out if you change your mind or the board pushes back. Done. She pulled out her phone and typed rapidly. I'll have the paperwork ready by end of day. They stood in the conference room, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, and Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him again. This was real. This was happening. The weekend had changed something after all. Thank you, he said finally. Don't thank me. You earned this. Claire's voice softened slightly. What I did, the demotion, the way I treated you, it was wrong. I'm trying to make it right. Because it's the right thing to do. Yes, and because... She stopped, choosing her words carefully. Because this weekend showed me what kind of leader I've been. And it's not who I want to be. Before Ethan could respond, his phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then started ringing. Sorry, He glanced at the screen and his heart stopped. Sophie's school. I have to take this, he answered, already moving toward the door. Hello? Mr. Walker? This is Principal Davidson. Sophie's fine, but there's been an incident. What kind of incident? Another student said something unkind about her mother. Sophie became upset and pushed him. We need you to come in and discuss this. Ethan closed his eyes. Sophie had never been physical before, never lashed out. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He ended the call and turned to find Claire watching him with concern. Sophie? Trouble at school. I have to go. Of course. Go. She hesitated. She okay? I don't know. I'll find out. He grabbed his laptop bag and headed for the door, then paused. Claire? Thanks. For the reinstatement and for asking about Sophie. That's what decent humans do, Ethan. Ask about each other's kids. He managed a tight smile and left, his mind already racing ahead to the school, to whatever had happened, to Sophie, who was usually so careful about her feelings, so good at keeping the grief tucked away where it couldn't hurt anyone. The elementary school principal's office was exactly as Ethan remembered from previous visits. Administrative beige, motivational posters about kindness and respect, the faint smell of industrial cleaner. Sophie sat in a chair outside the office, her face blotchy with tears, her small hands clenched in her lap. "Baby girl." Ethan crouched in front of her. "What happened?" "Tommy said Mama left because she didn't love us enough to stay." Sophie's voice broke. "He said she chose to die instead of being my mom." White-hot rage flooded through Ethan, followed immediately by crushing sadness. "Oh, Sophie, you know that's not true." "I know, but he kept saying it, and everyone was listening, and I pushed him." She looked up with desperate eyes. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I know I shouldn't have, but I was so mad." "It's okay to be mad. It's not okay to push." He pulled her into a hug, feeling her small body shake with sobs. "But I understand why you did." Principal Davidson emerged from her office, a kind woman in her 50s who'd been principal when Ethan had attended this same school decades ago. "Mr. Walker, let's talk." They sat in her office while Sophie waited outside, and Davidson explained the situation with careful neutrality. Tommy had been taunting Sophie about her mother during recess. Sophie had told him to stop. He'd continued. She'd pushed him, not hard, but enough that he'd fallen and scraped his knee. "I understand Sophie was provoked," Davidson said, "and Tommy will face consequences for his unkind words. But we have a zero-tolerance policy for physical contact." "What kind of consequences are we talking about?" Ethan kept his voice level. "For Sophie, 1 day in school suspension. For Tommy, the same, plus a written apology." She leaned forward. "Mr. Walker, I know Sophie has been through tremendous loss, and she's generally a model student, but we can't allow this behavior, regardless of the circumstances." "I understand." And he did, even if it felt unfair that his daughter was being punished for finally breaking under the weight of grief she carried with more grace than most adults. "I'll talk to her, make sure she understands." "I know you will. You're a good father." Davidson's expression softened. "How is she doing? Really?" "Most days, okay, but it hits her sometimes, out of nowhere. A song on the radio that her mom used to sing. Seeing other kids with their mothers at school events." Ethan rubbed his face. "I try to fill both roles, but I can't be her mom. And kids can be cruel about differences." "They can. We're working on building a more compassionate culture here, but it's slow going." She stood. "Take Sophie home for the rest of the day. Let her settle. The suspension starts tomorrow." Ethan collected Sophie and drove home in heavy silence. She stared out the window, her elephant clutched tight, not speaking until they pulled into the driveway. "Am I in big trouble?" she asked in a small voice. "You're in some trouble, but mostly I'm worried about you." He turned to face her. "Talk to me, baby. What's going on?" "I miss Mama." Simple words, but they held universes of pain. "And I hate that other kids have their mamas and I don't. And I hate that Tommy said she chose to leave. She didn't choose, right? She couldn't help being sick?" "She couldn't help it at all." Ethan's voice was rough. "Your mama fought so hard to stay with us. Every single day she fought. The cancer was just stronger." "I don't remember her fight. I just remember her being tired." "You were little, but I remember. I remember how brave she was, how much she wanted to see you grow up." He reached over and took Sophie's hand. "And she's still here, in a way, in you. You have her smile and her kindness and her fierce heart. Is that why I pushed Tommy? Because of Mama's fierce heart?" Despite everything, Ethan almost smiled. "Maybe, but we have to find better ways to use that fierceness. Pushing people isn't the answer." "I know. I'm sorry. I know you are. And tomorrow you'll serve your suspension, and that'll be the end of it." He squeezed her hand. "But Sophie, I'm proud of you for standing up for your mama's memory. I just need you to do it with words next time, not fists." They went inside and Ethan made hot chocolate, the fancy kind with real cream and shaved chocolate on top, comfort food for hard days. They sat at the kitchen table and Sophie told him everything, all the small cruelties she'd been enduring, the comments about her mother, the way some kids treated her differently because she only had a dad. "I don't tell you because I don't want you to be sad," she said. Baby, I'm sad anyway. That's part of grief. It comes and goes. But you should always tell me when something's bothering you. Even if it makes you worry? Especially then. That's what dads are for. His phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Is Sophie okay? He stared at the message, surprised she'd remembered, surprised she'd followed up. He typed back, She will be. Thanks for asking. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, if you need anything, let me know. I mean that. Something in his chest loosened slightly. Maybe the weekend had changed things. Maybe Claire Donovan was learning to be human after all. The rest of the week unfolded with unexpected smoothness. The paperwork for Ethan's reinstatement came through on Tuesday, signed and official. His salary was restored, back pay deposited. He moved back to his old desk by the window, and if his colleagues were curious about the sudden reversal, they kept it to themselves. Claire was true to her word about the weekly check-ins. Every Friday at 4 p.m., 30 minutes blocked on both their calendars. The first meeting was awkward, both of them hyper-aware of maintaining professionalism, of not referencing the weekend that had changed everything. But by the second week, they'd found a rhythm. Claire asked good questions, pushed him to think deeper about his approaches. Ethan pushed back when her expectations were unrealistic, and she listened, actually listened, rather than steamrolling his concerns. You're different, Mark observed one afternoon, catching Ethan at the coffee station. More confident or something. Am I? Yeah. And Donovan's different too. Less Ice Queen, more human. Mark lowered his voice. What happened? Everyone's noticed the change. Nothing happened. She's just settling into the role. If you say so. But Mark looked unconvinced. On Thursday of the third week, Ethan's phone rang just as he was leaving work. Sophie's number. Daddy, guess what? What, baby? Noah's here. Ms. Donovan brought him to visit, and we're making pizza, and can he stay for dinner? Please, please, please? Ethan's heart kicked into an unfamiliar rhythm. Put Ms. Donovan on the phone. A pause. Rustling, then Claire's voice. Sorry for the ambush. Noah's been asking constantly to see Sophie, and I had a meeting in Brookhaven this afternoon, so I thought, it's fine. And surprisingly, it was. I'll be home in 20 minutes. We'll order the pizza. What toppings? Sophie likes pepperoni. I'm not picky. Okay. See you soon. He drove home faster than necessary, his mind spinning. This was crossing a line, wasn't it? Moving from professional into personal territory, blurring boundaries that should stay sharp. But Sophie's happiness was worth any awkwardness. The house smelled like pizza when he walked in, and childish laughter echoed from the living room. Sophie and Noah had apparently picked up their friendship exactly where they'd left off 3 weeks ago, sprawled on the floor with Legos scattered everywhere. Claire stood in his kitchen, looking both out of place and oddly natural in her work clothes, holding a glass of water like she wasn't sure what to do with her hands. Hi, Ethan said, for lack of anything more intelligent. Hi. She managed a smile. The pizza place said 30 minutes. I hope that's okay. It's fine. Good, actually. I'm starving. He set down his laptop bag and moved to the fridge. Beer? God, yes. He pulled out 2 bottles and handed her one. They stood in the kitchen, exactly like that first Sunday morning, the memory hanging between them. So, Claire said finally, a meeting in Brookhaven? Complete fabrication. I wanted to see you. She took a sip of beer. Professionally, I mean, to discuss your project outside the office environment. Is that what we're calling this? A professional consultation? What would you call it? Ethan considered. 2 single parents coordinating a play date. That's actually accurate. Claire laughed, some of the tension dissolving. When did our lives get this complicated? Mine's been complicated since Emma got sick. Yours? Since I decided career was more important than marriage. She moved to the window, looking out at the backyard where the fence Ethan had repaired was visible. Michael, Noah's father, he tried to tell me, said I was choosing work over family. I thought he was being dramatic. Was he wrong? No, but neither was I. She turned back to face him. Why should I have been the one to sacrifice my career? Why couldn't we both find balance? Fair question. What's the answer? I don't know, but I'm starting to think maybe we both failed. Him for demanding I be someone I wasn't. Me for refusing to compromise at all. She took another sip of beer. Noah sees him every other weekend, and it's fine. It's workable. But I hate that we couldn't make it work, that my son has divorced parents before he's even 10. Sophie doesn't have that problem. She just doesn't have a mother at all. The words came out harsher than Ethan intended. Sorry, that wasn't fair. No, you're allowed to be angry about that, about losing Emma so young, about having to raise Sophie alone. I'm not angry. Most days anyway. I'm just tired. Yeah. Claire's smile was sad. Me too. The pizza arrived, breaking the moment. They ate at the kitchen table, the four of them, like some bizarre approximation of a normal family. Noah told elaborate stories about his robotics club, while Sophie hung on every word, clearly hero-worshipping this older, cooler boy who liked the same things she did. Can Noah stay over? Sophie asked as they were finishing. Sophie, Ethan started. Actually, that would solve a problem. Claire looked embarrassed. My usual sitter canceled, and I have an early meeting tomorrow. If Ethan could drop Noah at school on his way... Absolutely not, Ethan said firmly. Then, seeing her face fall, I won't drop him at school. He can stay here, but I'll take him home tonight so he has his own clothes and school stuff. That's too much. Claire, let people help you. He used her own words from that first morning. Stop turning everything into a transaction. She stared at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Okay, thank you. You're welcome. So Ethan found himself driving to Claire's house in the city, a townhouse in an upscale neighborhood, all modern lines and expensive landscaping. Noah ran inside to grab his backpack while Ethan waited in the entryway, taking in the decorator-perfect living room that looked barely lived in. It's not much of a home, is it? Claire said quietly, following his gaze. More like a hotel I pay mortgage on. It's nice. It's empty. She gestured around at the pristine furniture, the art that matched the walls, the complete absence of clutter or personality. Noah spends more time at his dad's place because it's messier, and there are other kids, and it feels alive. So make it messier. Get a dog. Leave dishes in the sink. Is that the secret? Controlled chaos? That's life with kids. Chaos you learn to love. Noah thundered back down the stairs with his backpack. Ready? The drive back to Brookhaven was filled with Noah's chatter and Sophie's responses, the two kids building elaborate plans for the evening. Ethan caught Claire's eyes in the rear-view mirror more than once, and each time she was watching her son with an expression of mingled happiness and longing. Back at the house, Ethan set the kids up with a movie while he and Claire stood in the kitchen, neither quite ready to say goodbye. This is weird, right? Claire said finally. Us? This, whatever we're doing. Extremely weird. But good weird? I don't know yet. Ethan leaned against the counter, that familiar position. Ask me in a month. A month from now, I might be fired for fraternizing with employees. We're not fraternizing. We're two parents facilitating a friendship between our kids. Is that all this is? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications neither was ready to address. Ethan thought about the weekend, about pancakes and borrowed sweaters, and the way Claire's guard came down around her son. About how seeing her in his space, in his life, had shifted something he couldn't name. I don't know what this is, he admitted, but I know I don't hate it. High praise. But she was smiling. Come on, I'll walk you out. At her car, the same rental SUV which she'd apparently ended up keeping, Claire hesitated with her hand on the door. Ethan? Thank you for this, for being kind when you didn't have to be. Again. Stop thanking me. We're friends now, I think. Friends help each other. Are we friends? What else would we be? Claire opened her mouth, closed it, then shook her head. I don't know, but you're right. We're something, and I'm glad we are. She drove away, and Ethan stood in the driveway watching her taillights disappear, feeling the ground shift beneath him one more time. This thing between them, whatever it was, had teeth now. It had shape, and he had no idea if that was wonderful or terrifying. Probably both. Inside, the kids were halfway through their movie, already getting drowsy. Ethan settled into his armchair and let the familiar sounds of his house wash over him. This was good. This worked. Two kids who'd found friendship, two adults who'd found something more complicated than professional courtesy, but not yet definable as anything else. His phone buzzed. Claire. Home safe. Thanks again for taking Noah. He typed back. Anytime. And meant it, which was perhaps the scariest part of all. The pattern established itself over the following weeks with the inevitability of water finding its level. Noah would visit on weekends when his father had other plans, which happened with increasing frequency. Claire would stay for dinner, then linger over coffee while the children played, the conversation stretching longer each time. Sometimes Ethan would drive Noah back to the city and end up staying to help with homework or fix a leaky faucet Claire didn't have time to deal with. They were building something, friendship maybe, or the scaffolding of something more, but neither was ready to name it. At work, Ethan's reinstatement had settled into normalcy. The quarterly review came and went with Claire praising his project management in front of the entire board. Sarah Martinez cornered him afterward in the break room, eyebrows raised significantly. So you and Donovan are suddenly best friends? We're colleagues who respect each other's work. Right, and I'm the Queen of England. Sarah poured herself coffee with exaggerated casualness. Come on, Ethan, everyone's noticed. The way she looks at you in meetings. The way you two finish each other's sentences during presentations. That's called good working rapport. That's called chemistry. She studied him over the rim of her mug. Just be careful, okay? Office relationships are tricky even when there isn't a power imbalance. There's no relationship to be careful about. If you say so. But Sarah's expression said she didn't believe him for a second. The truth was, Ethan didn't know what to believe himself. He found himself looking forward to Friday afternoon check-ins with an eagerness that had nothing to do with project updates. Found himself volunteering to work late on nights when Claire was also in the office. The two of them, the last ones in the building, sharing takeout Chinese food and debating engineering philosophy until the janitorial staff started vacuuming around them. You're playing with fire, his father-in-law said bluntly one Sunday when Ethan dropped Sophie off for her weekly visit. Robert had never been one for subtle warnings. Your boss, Ethan? Really? We're friends. Friends who happen to have chemistry that's visible from space. Robert fixed him with the look that had intimidated Ethan when he'd first started dating Emma. I'm not saying don't pursue it. I'm saying be smart about it. For Sophie's sake as much as your own. Nothing's happening. Yet. But it's going to, and you need to be prepared for the fallout. Robert's expression softened. Emma's been gone 3 years, son. It's okay to move on. It's okay to be happy again. Just don't be stupid about it. Ethan thought about that conversation all week, turning it over in his mind like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Was he being stupid? Was this thing with Claire destined for disaster? Probably. Almost certainly. But he couldn't seem to make himself care enough to stop. On Thursday evening, his phone rang. Claire's number, but Noah's voice came through, high and panicked. Mr. Walker, it's Noah. I can't. Mom's not answering, and I'm supposed to be at Dad's, but he's not here, and Mom's in meetings, and I don't know what to do. Slow down, buddy. Where are you? At Dad's building. The doorman says Dad's not home and won't be home until late, and I'm supposed to stay here, but I can't get in, and... Okay, listen to me. Stay with the doorman. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming to get you. But Mom said I shouldn't bother you. You're not bothering me. Stay put. 20 minutes. Ethan grabbed his keys and called Claire as he ran to his truck, straight to voicemail. He tried 3 more times during the drive into the city, each time hitting that same pleasant recorded voice asking him to leave a message. He found Noah in the lobby of an expensive high-rise in downtown Dallas, sitting on a leather chair that made him look even smaller than usual. The doorman, a professionally neutral man in his 40s, looked relieved when Ethan arrived. You're the father? Friend of the family. I've got it from here. Ethan crouched in front of Noah. You okay? Dad forgot. He has a work thing. Noah's voice was small, trying so hard to be brave. He said he'd reschedule, but I think he forgot to tell Mom. Not your fault, not your job to keep track of adult scheduling. Ethan ruffled Noah's hair. Come on, let's get you some dinner. They ended up at a diner near Ethan's house, the kind of place with red vinyl booths and laminated menus and waitresses who called everyone honey. Noah slowly relaxed over burgers and fries, the crisis receding into just another disappointment in what Ethan suspected was a long line of them. "Does your dad forget a lot?" Ethan asked carefully. "Sometimes. He's busy with Tanya and her kids." Noah dragged a fry through ketchup. "It's okay. I understand." "It's not okay. You're his son. You should be a priority." "Mom says that too, but then she misses stuff because of work, so I don't know." Noah looked up with eyes too old for his face. "Is it bad that sometimes I like it better when they forget? Because then I get to hang out with you and Sophie?" Ethan's chest tightened. "It's not bad, buddy, but you should be able to count on your parents." "Can I count on you?" The question was so simple, so devastating in its directness. Ethan thought about all the ways he could answer, all the careful caveats he should include. Instead, he just said, "Yeah, you can count on me." Noah's smile was bright enough to hurt. They were back at the house, Noah and Sophie deep into a Lego project, when Claire finally called. It was nearly 9 p.m., and her voice was ragged with exhaustion and fear. "Ethan, I just saw Noah's messages, and Michael's not answering, and I can't find... He's here. He's safe." A sob of relief. "Oh, thank God. I'm so sorry. I was in back-to-back meetings, and my phone was off, and..." "Claire, breathe. He's fine. We had burgers, and now he's building spaceships with Sophie. I'm the worst mother in the world." "You're not. You're a mother who got caught in a bad situation. It happens." He moved to the porch for privacy. Michael stood him up, left him waiting in the lobby. "He what?" Rage replaced fear in her voice. "That son of a... I'm going to kill him." "Get in line, but first come get your kid, or let him stay the night if you're too tired to drive." "I should come get him. I should..." Her voice cracked. "I don't want to face you right now." "Why not?" "Because I'm a mess. Because this whole thing is my fault for trusting Michael to show up when he never does. Because I'm failing at every single thing that matters." "Claire, stop. You're spiraling." "I have a right to spiral." "You do, but not while you're driving. So either come here and spiral in person, or let Noah stay and spiral at home. Your choice." Silence, then a shaky laugh. "How do you do that?" "What?" "Make everything seem manageable, even when it's falling apart." "Practice. 3 years of single parenting teaches you to triage crises." He softened his voice. "Come here. Have some wine. Yell at me if it helps. But stop beating yourself up for things you can't control." "Okay, I'll be there in 30 minutes." She arrived in 45, still in her work clothes but with her hair escaping its bun and mascara smudged under her eyes. Ethan took one look at her and pulled her into the house, steering her to the couch while the kids called greetings from the floor. "Wine or whiskey?" he asked. "Yes." He brought both. Claire downed the whiskey in one go and then clutched the wine glass like a lifeline. "I talked to Michael. He claims he texted me that he had to reschedule, but I never got it. And even if he did, who leaves a 9-year-old stranded? Someone who's prioritizing his new family over his old one." "Noah said that?" Claire's voice was sharp with hurt. "He didn't have to. It's written all over him." Ethan sat in the armchair, giving her space. "How long has this been going on?" "Since Michael moved in with Tanya about 6 months ago. Before that, he was more reliable. But now there's always a soccer game for her kids, or a school thing, or a family dinner that somehow Noah isn't part of." "Have you talked to him about it?" "Endlessly. He claims I'm being oversensitive, that Noah's fine, that I'm projecting my own abandonment issues." She took a long sip of wine. "Maybe he's right. Maybe I am projecting. Or maybe he's gaslighting you to avoid taking responsibility." Claire looked at him with something like desperation. "How do you know the right thing to do for Sophie? How do you make sure you're not screwing her up?" "I don't know if I am doing the right thing. I just do my best and hope it's enough." Ethan leaned forward. "Sophie's in therapy. Did you know that? Has been since Emma died. Because I knew I couldn't handle all her grief on my own. Is that the right thing? Or should I have been strong enough to help her myself?" "That's incredibly responsible parenting. Or it's admitting I'm not enough. I don't know anymore." He met her eyes. "We're all just doing our best, Claire. You, me, even Michael, in his own screwed-up way. The question isn't whether we're perfect. It's whether we show up. You know, I'm trying to show up, but work keeps getting in the way. So adjust work. I can't just... She stopped, hearing her own words. That's the problem, isn't it? I keep saying I can't when what I mean is I won't, because work feels safer than the messy emotions of parenting. Is it safer? No, it's just familiar. She drained her wine glass. When I'm at work, I know the rules. I know how to succeed, but with Noah, I'm constantly terrified I'm doing it wrong. Welcome to parenthood. The terror never stops. Ethan smiled slightly. But you're doing better than you think. Noah's a good kid. Smart, kind, resilient. You did that. We did that. Michael and I, when we were still functioning. She set down her glass. Do you ever wish you could go back? To before everything got complicated? Before Emma got sick? Every single day. The admission hurt, but it was true. But I can't, so I go forward. Is that what this is? Us? Going forward? The question landed between them like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. Ethan thought about denying it, deflecting, keeping things safely ambiguous. Instead, he told the truth. I don't know what this is, but I know I'm glad you're here. Claire's eyes held his, green and uncertain and desperately hopeful. Me too. The moment stretched, fragile and charged. Then Sophie's voice cut through it. Dad, come see what we built! The spell broke. Claire laughed, slightly shaky, and they joined the kids on the floor to admire an elaborate spaceship with improbable proportions and absolutely no adherence to actual physics. It's beautiful, Claire said seriously. Very imaginative. Noah did most of it, Sophie said proudly. He's really smart about engineering stuff. He gets that from his mom, Ethan said, catching Claire's eye. She looked away first, a flush rising in her cheeks. The evening ended with Noah asleep on the couch and Sophie passed out on the floor, both kids exhausted from building and playing and the emotional weight of the day. Ethan and Claire sat in the kitchen, speaking in low voices over lukewarm coffee. I should go, Claire said, but didn't move. You should, Ethan agreed, but didn't stand. This is dangerous, isn't it? What we're doing? Probably. The board would have my head if they knew I was spending this much time with you outside work. She traced the rim of her mug with one finger. There are policies about fraternization, about power dynamics and conflicts of interest. So we stop, we keep it professional. Is that what you want? No. The word came out with more force than he intended. But I'm not the CEO. I don't have as much to lose. You have Sophie to think about. If this goes wrong, if we end up making things messy at work, Claire, stop catastrophizing. Someone has to. She looked at him with raw honesty. I'm falling for you, Ethan, and I don't know if that's real, or if it's just gratitude and loneliness and the fact that you're the first person in years who's seen me as something other than a title. His heart was hammering so hard he was sure she could hear it. What if it's both? Gratitude and loneliness and something real? Then we're in trouble. Yeah, we probably are. They sat in the kitchen, the house quiet around them, and let the truth of it settle. This thing between them had weight now, substance, and they could either acknowledge it or pretend it didn't exist. Before either could decide, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Noah appeared, rubbing his eyes. Mom, can we go home? Of course, baby. Claire stood, the moment shattered. Let's get you to bed. Ethan helped carry Noah to Claire's car, the boy barely conscious, mumbling sleepy protests. When Noah was buckled in, Claire turned to Ethan on the dark driveway. Thank you. For today. For everything. Stop thanking me. I know, but I mean it. You didn't have to eat. Yes, I did. He cut her off gently. Because you matter. And Noah matters. And I care about you both. Ethan, don't. Not tonight. We're both tired and emotional, and anything we say right now we'll overthink tomorrow. He stepped back, creating space. Go home. Get some sleep. We'll figure the rest out later. She nodded and climbed into the car. But before pulling away, she rolled down the window. I care about you too. You and Sophie. Just so you know. Then she was gone, taillights disappearing down the street, and Ethan stood in his driveway feeling like he'd just stepped off a cliff and wasn't sure yet if he could fly. The fallout came on Monday, swift and brutal. Parker Hale, the VP of Operations and Claire's main rival for the CEO position, called an emergency board meeting. Ethan didn't know about it until Sarah Martinez pulled him into an empty conference room, her face tight with worry. "Did you sleep with her?" Sarah asked without preamble. "What? No." "Then what the hell's going on? Because Parker's telling the board that you and Claire are having an affair, and she reinstated you as a quid pro quo for sexual favors." The room tilted. "That's insane." "Is it? Because you two have been spending an awful lot of time together. People have noticed, and Parker's building a case that your promotion was favoritism, not merit-based." "It was merit-based. My work speaks for itself." "Your work is excellent, but perception matters, Ethan. And right now, the perception is that the CEO is playing favorites with an employee she's sleeping with." "We're not sleeping together." "But you want to be." Sarah's voice was gentle. "I can see it. Hell, everyone can see it. The way you look at each other, the inside jokes. The fact that you know her coffee order and she knows Sophie's favorite color." Ethan sat down heavily. "We're friends. That's all." "Friends don't look at each other the way you two do." Sarah pulled up a chair. "Look, I'm not judging. If anyone deserves happiness, it's you. But this could destroy both your careers if you're not careful." "What do I do?" "Stay away from her, at least until this blows over. And pray to God the board doesn't ask you to testify." They asked him to testify. The hearing was scheduled for Friday afternoon, 3 days away. Ethan barely slept, running through possible questions and answers, trying to figure out how to tell the truth without destroying Claire in the process. She called Wednesday night, her voice hollow. "They're going after my job, aren't they?" "I don't know." "Parker showed them photos, Ethan. Someone's been following me, pictures of my car at your house, of us having coffee, of Noah and me at your door." Her voice broke. "They're going to twist it into something ugly." "Then we tell them the truth, that we're friends, that Noah and Sophie are friends, that there's nothing inappropriate happening." "Will they believe that?" "Do you have a better idea?" Silence. Then, "I could fire you, make it look like I'm taking their concerns seriously, distance myself until this passes." "You'd do that? After everything? To save my job? To protect you from this mess?" Her voice was anguished. "Yes, I would." "Don't." The word came out fierce. "Don't sacrifice either of us because Parker Hale is a vindictive bastard playing office politics." "Then what do? We fight. Together. We show them that there's nothing wrong with two single parents being friends. That not everything has to be reduced to sex and scandal. You have more faith in corporate America than I do." "Maybe. But I'm not letting you fall on your sword for this. Not when we haven't done anything wrong." "Haven't we, though?" Claire's voice was quiet. "Haven't we been dancing around something we both know is more than friendship? Haven't we been lying to ourselves?" "Probably, but lying to yourself isn't a fireable offense." She laughed, short and bitter. "It should be." The board hearing was worse than Ethan had imagined. Parker Hale presented his case with the smooth confidence of someone who'd been planning this for months. Photos, testimony from employees about the time Claire and Ethan spent together, documentation of the pay increase, and promotion. "It's a clear pattern of favoritism," Parker concluded, motivated by a personal relationship that violates company policy on fraternization. The board chair, an older man named Theodore Brennan, fixed Ethan with a penetrating stare. "Mr. Walker, are you in a romantic relationship with Ms. Donovan?" "No, sir." "Have you been in the past?" "No, sir." "But you spend significant time together outside of work." Our children are friends. We coordinate playdates and carpools." Ethan kept his voice level. "Is that inappropriate?" "That depends." "Are you attracted to Ms. Donovan?" The question was a trap. Answer yes and confirm Parker's allegations. Answer no and commit perjury under company policy. Ethan thought about Claire in his kitchen wearing Emma's sweater. Thought about the way she laughed at Sophie's jokes. Thought about standing on his driveway admitting he cared. "With respect, sir, my personal feelings are irrelevant. What matters is whether I've acted on them in a way that compromises professional integrity. I haven't. Ms. Donovan reinstated me because my work merited it. Everything else is speculation and gossip. But you haven't answered the question, because it's not a question you have the right to ask. Ethan stood his ground. You want to investigate whether Claire showed me favoritism? Fine. Audit my projects. Review my performance metrics. Talk to my colleagues. But don't ask me to testify about feelings that have no bearing on professional conduct. Theodore's eyebrows rose. That's quite a speech, Mr. Walker. It's the truth, sir. Even if your feelings for Ms. Donovan are genuine, even if they cloud your judgment about the legitimacy of your promotion. My feelings don't cloud my judgment. They motivate me to work harder, to prove that her faith in me wasn't misplaced. He met Theodore's eyes directly. Sir, I'm a single father raising a daughter on my own. I can't afford to screw up my career for an office romance that doesn't exist. Everything I do is calculated to provide stability for Sophie. That includes working my ass off to justify Ms. Donovan's decision to promote me. A long silence. Then Theodore nodded. You're dismissed, Mr. Walker. Ethan left the boardroom on shaking legs. Sarah was waiting in the hall, her expression anxious. How bad? I don't know. Could go either way. You okay? Ask me when I know if I still have a job. He went home early, unable to focus on work. Sophie was at her grandparents' for the afternoon, so the house was empty, too quiet. Ethan poured himself a bourbon and sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and red. His phone buzzed. Claire. Whatever happens, thank you for not throwing me under the bus. He typed back, we're in this together. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, I'm scared. Me too. Can I come over? Ethan thought about Sarah's warning, thought about Parker's photos, thought about making things worse by being seen together right now. Then he typed, yes. She arrived 30 minutes later, still in her work clothes, her face drawn and exhausted. They sat on the porch in silence, watching nightfall, not touching, but close enough that the space between them felt electric. They're going to fire me, Claire said finally. You don't know that. Parker made a compelling case. And he's not wrong. I did show you favoritism. Maybe not for the reasons he thinks, but I can't honestly say my feelings didn't influence the decision. Would you have promoted me if we'd never spent that weekend together? Eventually, yes. You're too good not to promote, but would I have done it as quickly? Would I have fought as hard for you? She shook her head. I don't know. Then we face whatever comes next. Ethan finally took her hand, the first time they touched like this, deliberately, with intention. Together. Together. She squeezed his hand. Even if it costs us everything? What's the alternative? Pretending this doesn't exist? Going back to being strangers? He turned to face her. I can't do that, Claire. I tried. I can't. Neither can I. She leaned her head on his shoulder and Ethan wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. They sat like that as the stars came out. 2 people who'd found each other in a storm and were trying desperately not to lose each other in the aftermath. What do we tell the kids? Claire asked quietly. Nothing yet. Not until we know what's happening. And if I lose my job? If you lose yours? If this all falls apart? Then we figure it out. That's what we do. We figure things out. She lifted her head to look at him, and in the porch light her eyes were bright with unshed tears. How are you so calm about this? I'm not. I'm terrified. He touched her face gently. But I learned a long time ago that fear doesn't change outcomes. It just makes the waiting harder. Teach me that. How to not let the fear win. I don't think I can teach it. I think you just have to live through enough crises that you build up scar tissue. I don't want more scars. Then maybe, Ethan said softly, we need to stop seeing them as scars and start seeing them as proof we survived. Claire closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between watching my wife die and raising a daughter alone. Tragedy's a hell of a teacher. They stayed on the porch until the cold drove them inside. Claire helped him make dinner even though neither of them was hungry, the domesticity of it both comforting and surreal. Two people playing house while their professional lives collapsed around them. I should go, Claire said for the third time, but didn't move from the kitchen table. You should, Ethan agreed, but didn't stand to walk her out. If someone sees my car here, then they see it. Let them talk. We're not doing anything wrong. Aren't we? She met his eyes. I'm your boss, Ethan. There's an inherent power imbalance. Maybe Parker's right to be concerned. Parker doesn't give a damn about power imbalances. He wants your job, and he's using me to get it. Still, it's a valid point. So what do you want to do? Walk away? Pretend this never happened? No. The word was immediate, certain. But I don't know how to move forward without hurting you. Let me worry about me. You worry about you. That's not how this works. Not when your career is on the line because of me. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand again. Listen to me. Whatever the board decides, whatever happens next, I don't regret any of it. Not helping you that night, not becoming friends, not caring about you. Even if it cost me my job, I don't regret it. You should. I've been nothing but trouble for you. You've been complicated. That's different. He smiled slightly. I've had enough simple in my life. Complicated is interesting. Is that what I am? Interesting? Among other things. What other things? The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. Ethan thought about all the careful, appropriate answers he should give. Instead, he told the truth. Beautiful, brilliant, infuriating, brave, scared, human. He paused. Mine, if you'll let me claim that. Claire's breath caught. Ethan, I know it's too soon. I know we're in the middle of a crisis. I know every logical reason this is a terrible idea. He held her gaze. But I'm tired of being logical. For 3 years, I've been careful and measured and appropriate. And I'm done. I want messy. I want complicated. I want you. Even if it destroys everything? Even then. She stood abruptly, and for a moment Ethan thought she was leaving. Instead, she moved around the table and kissed him, fierce and desperate, and everything he hadn't let himself want. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Claire rested her forehead against his. This is insane, she whispered. Completely. We're going to regret this. Probably. But you're not backing down? Not a chance. She laughed, slightly unsteady. Then I guess we're doing this. I guess we are. They stood in Ethan's kitchen, holding each other while the world burned down around them, and somehow it felt like the sanest thing either of them had done in years. The call came at 6 a.m. on Saturday. Ethan was already awake, had been for hours actually, staring at the ceiling and running through worst-case scenarios. When his phone lit up with Theodore Brennan's number, his heart kicked into overdrive. Mr. Walker, I apologize for the early hour. It's fine, sir. I've been up. I imagine you have. Theodore's voice was grave. The board has reached a decision. We'd like you and Ms. Donovan to come in Monday morning at 8. We'll be making an announcement. Can you tell me? Monday morning, Mr. Walker. Enjoy what's left of your weekend. The line went dead. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, phone clutched in his hand, trying to breathe through the anxiety clawing at his chest. Enjoy the weekend. What the hell did that mean? Were they both fired? Was it just Claire, just him? He texted Claire, Tess. Board called. Meeting Monday 8 a.m. Her response was immediate. Can't sleep either. Come over? He shouldn't. Sophie was still asleep down the hall, and it was barely dawn, and showing up at Claire's house right now would just feed the rumor mill. But screw it. They were already in freefall. Might as well fall together. He left a note for Sophie, gone for a morning run, back by breakfast, and drove to the city as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Claire answered the door in pajama pants and an oversized sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking younger and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. Noah? Ethan asked. At his dad's. Michael actually showed up on time for once. She stepped aside to let him in. Coffee? God, yes. They sat at her kitchen island, gleaming marble and state-of-the-art appliances, everything perfectly coordinated and utterly impersonal. Claire wrapped her hands around her mug like she was trying to draw warmth from it. So this is it, she said quietly. D-Day. We don't know what they're going to say. Don't we? She looked at him with tired eyes. Parker built a solid case, and he's not wrong. I did let my personal feelings influence professional decisions. That's exactly the kind of thing boards fire CEOs for. Then they fire you and we move on. You'll get another CEO position somewhere else. You're too good not to. And you? If they fire you too? Then I find another engineering job. There's always work for good engineers. Just like that? You'd give up 3 years at Meridian? For you? Yeah. The admission came easier than he expected. I would. Claire set down her mug with a sharp click. Don't make me responsible for destroying your career. You're not destroying anything. Parker Hale is, and a board that's more concerned with optics than actual performance. Ethan moved around the island to stand in front of her. Claire, look at me. She did, reluctantly. Whatever happens Monday, we face it together. No martyrs, no falling on swords, no taking the blame alone. Deal? Deal, she managed a watery smile. When did you become the strong one in this relationship? Is that what this is? A relationship? I don't know what else to call it. Two people who started as enemies became friends and now are, dating? While possibly unemployed? Sounds about right. He pulled her into his arms and she came willingly, tucking her head under his chin. They stood in her sterile kitchen while the morning brightened outside, and Ethan felt a strange calm settle over him. Whatever came next, they'd handle it. They'd survived worse. The weekend passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Sophie and Noah had their play date, oblivious to the adult drama swirling around them. Claire and Ethan pretended everything was fine, laughed at the kids' jokes, made dinner together like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. But underneath the surface, tension hummed like a live wire. Sunday evening, after Claire and Noah had left, Sophie climbed into Ethan's lap while they watched TV. Dad? Is Miss Donovan your girlfriend? The question caught him completely off guard. Why would you ask that? Because you look at her the way you used to look at Mama. In the pictures, I mean. Sophie studied his face with those two perceptive eyes. And she looks at you the same way. It's complicated, baby. Do you love her? Did he? It was too soon for love, wasn't it? They'd only known each other a few months, and most of that time had been fraught with complications. But when he thought about Claire, her fierce intelligence, her vulnerability with Noah, the way she'd slowly let her walls down, his chest tightened with something that felt an awful lot like love. I might, he admitted. Is that okay? Sophie was quiet for a long moment, her small face serious. Will she replace Mama? Oh, sweetheart, no. Nobody replaces your Mama. Ever. Ethan pulled her closer. Your Mama will always be your Mama, and I'll always love her. But people's hearts are big enough to love more than one person. Loving Claire doesn't mean I love Mama any less. And if Claire becomes your girlfriend, Noah would be like my brother? Kind of? Yeah. Okay. Sophie nodded decisively. I like Noah. And Ms. Donovan is nice when she's not being a work person, so it's okay if you love her. Just like that? Just like that. She looked up at him. You've been sad for a long time, Daddy. I want you to be happy again. Ethan felt tears prick his eyes. When did you get so wise? I learned from you. She kissed his cheek. That's what you always tell me. We learn from the people we love. He held his daughter tight and thought about Emma, about whether she'd approve of this mess he'd gotten himself into. He liked to think she would. Emma had always believed in second chances and the possibility of joy after sorrow. She wouldn't want him to stay frozen in grief forever. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of sunrise. Ethan dropped Sophie at school and drove to Meridian with his stomach in knots. The parking lot was emptier than usual. Most employees didn't arrive until 9, but Claire's car was already there, parked in her reserved spot like a challenge. He found her in her office, staring out the window at the city skyline. She'd armored up again, sharp suit, perfect makeup, hair pulled back in that severe bun. But when she turned to face him, he could see the fear in her eyes. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be. They walked to the boardroom together, not touching, but close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed. Theodore Brennan was already there, along with the other board members. Parker Hale sat at the far end of the table, his expression carefully neutral but with triumph lurking behind his eyes. "Ms. Donovan, Mr. Walker, please sit." Theodore gestured to chairs in the middle of the table, not at the head where Claire usually sat, which felt ominous. They sat. Ethan reached under the table and found Claire's hand, squeezing once. She squeezed back. Theodore opened a folder, his expression grave. "This board has spent considerable time reviewing Mr. Hale's allegations regarding the professional relationship between Ms. Donovan and Mr. Walker. We've examined performance metrics, interviewed colleagues, and reviewed all available evidence." Ethan's heart was hammering so hard he could barely hear over it. "Mr. Hale's concerns about the appearance of impropriety were not unfounded," Theodore continued. "In any organization, the relationship between a CEO and a direct report is subject to scrutiny, particularly when that relationship extends beyond professional boundaries." Here it came. The firing. The end of everything. "However," Theodore said, and Ethan's breath caught, "we found no evidence of actual impropriety. Mr. Walker's performance reviews consistently show excellence in his work. His promotion was justified by merit, not favoritism. And while Ms. Donovan's personal feelings for Mr. Walker may have influenced the timing of that promotion, they did not influence the decision itself." "Wait, what?" "Furthermore," Theodore fixed Parker with a stern look, "we found Mr. Hale's methods of gathering evidence, including hiring a private investigator to photograph Ms. Donovan and Mr. Walker, to be deeply problematic and a violation of company ethics policies." Parker's face went pale. "I was protecting the company's interests. You were engaging in harassment." Theodore's voice was ice. "The board has decided that your position as VP of Operations is no longer tenable. You're terminated, effective immediately." The room went silent. Ethan felt Claire's hand tighten in his, her shock mirroring his own. Parker stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. "You can't be serious. I exposed a scandal." "You manufactured a scandal," another board member, a woman named Patricia Chen, cut in. "There is a significant difference between identifying legitimate concerns and engaging in a vendetta motivated by professional jealousy." Parker's face flushed red. "This is bullshit. I'll sue." "You're welcome to try." Theodore's expression didn't change. "Security will escort you out. Your personal items will be shipped to you." Parker looked at Claire with pure hatred. "This isn't over." "I believe it is," Claire said quietly, finding her CEO voice. "Goodbye, Parker." He stormed out, and the boardroom collectively exhaled. Theodore turned back to Claire and Ethan. "That said, we do have concerns about the optics of your relationship. Not because we believe it's inappropriate, but because it opens the company to potential legal liability if things go badly." "I understand," Claire said. "What are you proposing?" "Full disclosure. You'll both sign acknowledgement forms stating that your relationship is consensual and separate from professional decisions. HR will monitor the situation to ensure no preferential treatment occurs. And Mr. Walker, you'll be moved to report to Sarah Martinez instead of Ms. Donovan directly, removing the direct reporting relationship." "That's it?" Ethan couldn't quite believe it. "We're not fired? Why would we fire two of our best employees?" Patricia smiled slightly. "Ms. Donovan, your leadership has improved our bottom line by 15% in less than a year. Mr. Walker, your projects consistently come in under budget and ahead of schedule. We'd be idiots to fire you over a personal relationship that hasn't impacted your work." Theodore nodded. "However, we do expect you to maintain professional boundaries at work. Save the personal interactions for off hours. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir," Claire and Ethan said in unison. "Good. Then this matter is closed." Theodore closed his folder. "Ms. Donovan, your position is secure. Mr. Walker, congratulations on surviving the most dramatic performance review in company history." It was said with a hint of humor, and Ethan felt laughter bubble up in his chest, slightly hysterical, mostly relief. They were dismissed. Claire walked back to her office on shaking legs, Ethan following. The moment the door closed, she turned and grabbed him, pulling him into a fierce kiss. "I can't believe that just happened," she said against his mouth. "We're not fired." "We're not fired. She laughed, the sound bright with disbelief. Parker's fired, but we're not. Karma's a beautiful thing. I need to call Noah, and you need to call Sophie. Claire pulled back, her eyes bright. We get to keep our jobs and be together. How is that possible? Sometimes, Ethan said, the universe decides to be kind instead of cruel. They stood in her office, holding each other while reality slowly sank in. They'd survived. Against all odds, they'd survived. The news spread through the office like wildfire. By lunch, everyone knew that Parker had been fired and Claire and Ethan were officially together. The gossip was intense, but most of it was positive. Apparently, they'd been the world's worst-kept secret, and people had been rooting for them. Finally, Sarah Martinez said, cornering Ethan at the coffee station, I've been waiting for you two to stop dancing around each other. You knew? Everyone knew. You two have the subtlety of a freight train, she grinned. But I'm happy for you. You deserve this. Mark Chen was equally supportive, though he couldn't resist teasing. So when's the wedding? Because Noah and Sophie are already planning it, according to my sources. Your sources? My daughter is in Sophie's class. Apparently Sophie's been telling everyone that her dad has a girlfriend and they're going to be a family. Ethan groaned. I need to have a talk with my daughter about discretion. Good luck with that. Kids have no filter. That evening, Ethan picked up Sophie from school and drove straight to Claire's house. Noah answered the door, grinning from ear to ear. Mom said you guys are dating now. Did she? Ethan shot Claire an amused look as she appeared behind Noah. I may have mentioned it. She was smiling, relaxed in a way he'd never seen her at work. Come in, we're making dinner. We? Noah and I. We're trying this new thing where I actually cook instead of ordering takeout every night. They made spaghetti together, all four of them crowded in Claire's pristine kitchen, getting sauce on the counters and flour everywhere. Sophie and Noah were in charge of garlic bread, which they took very seriously. Claire and Ethan worked on the sauce, moving around each other with the ease of people who'd done this before. This is nice, Claire said quietly, watching the kids debate the optimal amount of butter. It is. Ethan bumped her shoulder with his. You getting used to the chaos yet? Slowly. It's terrifying and wonderful at the same time. That's parenthood. That's life. He paused. That's us, I guess. Terrifying and wonderful? Something like that. They ate dinner at Claire's table, the fancy one that looked like it had never been used. Sophie chattered about school. Noah told elaborate stories about his robotics team, and the adults listened and laughed and felt something click into place. This wasn't just dating. This was building something, creating a foundation for something bigger. After dinner, the kids retreated to Noah's room to play video games, and Claire and Ethan cleaned up together. So, Claire said, drying dishes while Ethan washed, we're really doing this. Apparently. It's fast. Too fast, maybe. Probably. Ethan rinsed a plate and handed it to her. But we've already been through enough crises to test most relationships. If we can survive a near-death experience, office politics, and board investigations, I think we can handle dating. When you put it that way, dinner and a movie seems almost boring. Boring sounds great right about now. She laughed, and the sound was lighter than he'd ever heard it. You know what's crazy? I'm happy. Actually, genuinely happy. I don't think I've been happy in years. Me either. Ethan set down the sponge and turned to face her. Not since Emma died. I'd forgotten what it felt like. Oh, do you think she'd approve? Of us? I think she'd tell me I was an idiot for falling for my boss. He smiled. But yeah, she'd approve. Emma believed in second chances. She believed in joy after sorrow. I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you, once she got past the CEO intimidation factor. Ethan touched Claire's face gently. You remind me of her, actually, the fierce heart. The way you love Noah with everything you have, even when you're terrified you're doing it wrong. Was she scared too? Constantly, but she never let it stop her. He paused. That's what I see in you, someone who's scared but shows up anyway. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't deserve you. That's not how this works. We don't earn each other. We just choose each other every day and hope it's enough. She kissed him then, soft and lingering, a promise of more to come. The next few months unfolded with surprising smoothness. Claire and Ethan dated properly. Dinners out, movies, weekend trips to the lake with the kids. They took it slow, mindful of Sophie and Noah, making sure the children were comfortable with each change. Sophie bloomed having Noah around. The grief that had weighted her down for so long seemed lighter, as if having an older brother figure gave her permission to be a kid again. Noah, for his part, loved having a little sister to teach and protect. Michael's continued flakiness stung less when Noah had a full life waiting for him in Brookhaven. At work, Claire and Ethan maintained strict professionalism. The arrangement with Sarah Martinez as his direct supervisor worked well, removing any appearance of impropriety. Claire's quarterly reviews showed continued strong performance, and the board's concerns faded as her leadership proved unquestionably sound. In the quiet moments, though, Ethan sometimes felt Emma's presence, not as a ghost, but as a benediction. She was there in Sophie's laugh, in the way the evening light caught the kitchen window, in the stars on Sophie's ceiling that still glowed at night. He'd loved her completely, and he always would, but he was learning that the heart's capacity for love wasn't finite. It expanded to hold everyone who deserved space there. 6 months after the board hearing, on a Saturday afternoon at the lake, everything came together. They'd rented a cabin for Noah's 10th birthday, a weekend celebration with hiking and swimming and s'mores. Sophie and Noah had spent the afternoon building an elaborate sandcastle, while Claire and Ethan sat on the dock, feet dangling in the water. "I have something to tell you," Claire said, her voice nervous. Ethan's heart kicked up. "Good something or bad something?" "Good, I think." She took a breath. "The board offered me a 5-year contract extension. Significant raise, more autonomy, everything I've been working toward." "That's incredible. Claire, congratulations." "There's more. They want to expand operations, open a satellite office in Austin. They asked if I'd be interested in overseeing both locations." "That's a huge promotion." "It is, but it would mean more travel, more time away from Noah, from you and Sophie." She turned to face him. "I turned it down." Ethan stared at her. "You what?" "I turned it down because I realized something these past months." Claire's voice was steady, certain. "I spent years chasing the next promotion, the next achievement, thinking that's what would make me happy. But I was miserable. I had everything I thought I wanted and nothing I actually needed." "Claire, let me finish." She took his hand. "What makes me happy is having dinner with my son, watching him laugh with Sophie, coming home to you at the end of a hard day. I don't want to compartmentalize anymore. Work Claire and mom Claire and girlfriend Claire. I want to be one person who has work and family and love all mixed together in one messy, wonderful life." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Are you sure?" "Completely. I negotiated for more flexibility instead. Work from home twice a week, capped travel, guaranteed family time, and they agreed." She smiled. "Turns out when you're actually good at your job, you have leverage." "I'm so proud of you." He pulled her close, kissing her temple. "That took real courage." "I learned from the best." They sat on the dock while the afternoon sun painted the water gold, and Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years, complete peace. Not the absence of grief, Emma's loss would always be part of him, but the presence of something new, something growing, something that felt like a future. "Dad, Claire, come see," Sophie's voice carried from the beach. They walked back to find an enormous sandcastle, complete with towers and a moat and an elaborate flag made from a stick and Noah's t-shirt. "It's beautiful," Claire said seriously. "Truly architectural genius." "We made it together," Noah announced proudly. "Sophie did the design, I did the engineering." "Teamwork," Ethan said, meeting Claire's eyes over the children's heads. "Teamwork," she agreed, and the word held more weight than the kids could possibly understand. That evening, after the kids were asleep in their bunk beds, exhausted from sun and swimming, Claire and Ethan sat on the cabin porch. The stars were brilliant here, away from city lights, scattered across the sky like Emma's glow-in-the-dark stars, but infinite. "Thank you," Claire said quietly. "For what?" "For opening your door that night, for not turning me away when you had every reason to. You needed help. I needed more than help. I needed someone to see me as human instead of a title. I needed someone to show me what actually matters." She leaned against him. You saved my life that night, Ethan, not just from the storm, but from the person I was becoming. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to do it alone. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the lake. Tomorrow they'd pack up and head home. Monday, they'd return to work and normal life, and all the complications that entailed. But for now, there was just this. Two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and somehow built something beautiful from the wreckage. I love you, Ethan said, the words coming easily now. Just so you know. I know. I love you too, Claire smiled in the darkness. Even though you make terrible coffee and your truck is held together with duct tape and hope. Hey, that truck got me through a crisis. Show some respect. I'll respect it from a distance. They laughed, and the sound carried across the water, light and free. Inside the cabin, Sophie stirred in her sleep and reached for her elephant. In the bunk above, Noah mumbled something about robots and settled deeper into his pillow. Two children who'd needed siblings and found them. Two adults who'd needed second chances and grabbed them with both hands. The storm that brought them together had long since passed. But its gift remained, a family built not from blood or law, but from choice, from showing up, from opening doors when it would have been easier to keep them closed. Emma's stars still glowed on Sophie's ceiling back home, a reminder that light persists even in darkness. And here, under real stars, Ethan felt her blessing. Not in words or visions, but in the simple truth that love doesn't end. It transforms. It makes space for new love without diminishing what came before. Claire fell asleep against his shoulder, and Ethan held her while the night deepened around them. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own complications, but they'd face them together, him and Claire, Sophie and Noah, a makeshift family that somehow fit better than anything planned ever could. The dark was just the light taking a short break, he told Noah that first night. And here, finally, with stars overhead and the woman he loved in his arms, the light had come back. Different than before, softer around the edges, scarred but stronger for it. But light nonetheless. And that was enough. That was everything. The end.